Chapter 2503. Don't worry. I'm not a greedy person either. As long as we find out the strength of the 7 Extremes mountain range, of course, the final goal is to take down the 7 Extremes mountain range. All of you have contributed greatly, and this old man will not take even half of the battle credits. Xianxia smiled and said, "We're under Senior Can's lead, so the credit will naturally go to Senior." Everyone's face was filled with joy as they bowed and answered, Wait for me." Xianxia was very satisfied. He looked at the horizon and asked, "How's the situation with the Huanhua sect?" "I'll let Senior know." Ling Zhu hurriedly replied, "An hour ago, they sent a message. Just like us, they're only near the edge of the 7 Extremes mountain range and haven't encountered any sword cultivators." I'll send a message over as well. Tell them about this place." Xianxia instructed. "Also, order the disciples to increase their speed by 10% and prepare for battle." "Yes, we understand." Everyone's face turned cold. They knew that their previous ease had come to an end. As the distance increased, the battle was inevitable. When the group of Foundation Establishment late-stage cultivators returned to their group, only a few Imperial Thundersect disciples were left beside Xianxia. The entire group of cultivators indeed increased their speed. Xianxia squinted his eyes and stood with his hands behind his back. His face was filled with confidence as his gaze fell on the mountain range that looked like a screen. Buzz buzz buzz. A continuous sword cry that could even shake the earth and mountains was emitted from the 7 Extremes mountain range. Immediately after, a hurricane swept out and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered and poured into the 7 Extremes ridge. As the spiritual energy of heaven and earth poured into the 7 Extremes ridge, the hurricane became even bigger. Immediately, countless moo sounds were heard in the air and shook the surroundings. A hurricane blew across the vast sky and the robes of the 20,000 Dao sect cultivators were blown up. The accumulated snow on the snow region plateau was also swept up into the air. In the blink of an eye, a huge shadow suddenly appeared on the towering mountain range in the distance. Similarly, 20,000 swordsmen flew into the air from the 7 Extremes ridge in an orderly formation. The black mass of swordsmen blocked the setting sun and covered half of the sky. In addition to the intense flickering of the sword light, that oppressive aura was able to cause the sweat of the cultivators to stand even though they were dozens of miles away. They're just a group of people who want to show off. Xianxia was shocked, but he still sneered disdainfully. "Call Yufeng turn." Xianxia instructed, "Slow down and arrange the formation. I want to see if the treasures of my Imperial Thunder sect or the flying swords of the sword cultivators are more powerful." "Yes." The disciple beside him hurriedly sent out a message talisman upon receiving the order. Dui Yufeng and the others were originally hesitant, but at this moment, they received the order and returned. "Charge!" Xianxia waved his hand slightly and urged his transcendence energy to shout. When Xianxia's order fell into the ears of the 20,000 cultivators, it was like thunder. Everyone urged their transcendence energy at the same time. The magic tools and treasures in their hands were all taken out. Similarly, there were 10,000 flashes of lightning. Streams of heaven and earth spiritual qi gathered and similarly formed a hurricane. Especially the rolling thunder and flickering lightning. The momentum was so great that it was not inferior to the sword cultivators' sword formation. The group of cultivators and swordsmen were all on alert. Each of them urged their bodies. Seeing that the two sides were getting closer and closer, they could clearly see the two sides. When they heard the sword cultivators' orders, the 100 or so swordsmen who were riding on their flying swords at the very front urged their sword energy. The 100 or so sword flashes rushed out of the crowd and formed a huge flying sword in the sky. The sword flashes swayed as they rushed towards the cultivators. The cultivators' treasures could not be compared to the swordsmen's flying swords. They could not reach far. When they saw the flying swords attacking, the 100 or so cultivators also exerted their power at the same time. They shouted in unison and the magic tools in the sky flashed as they rushed out. Boom! A huge sound rang out. The flying swords collided with the group of magic tools. A series of explosions rang out and the airwaves rushed into the sky. The accumulated snow on the nearby snow region was blown away. At this time, the vegetation and gravel were also blown into the air. Not only that, the entire ground shook slightly from the impact of the airwaves. His sword cultivators indeed have some skills. The 100 or so flying swords rushed into the magic tools and collided with each other. Most of the flying swords were blocked by the magic tools. However, there were still about 10% of the flying swords that broke through the magic tool's defense and approached the cultivators. Xianxia could not help but sigh in his heart. However, the disciples of Imperial Thunder Sect were not mediocre. Immediately, another 100 or so disciples immediately activated their magic tools. One by one, the magic tools flashing with lightning and fire rushed out. Not only did they force the flying swords back, but they also counterattacked the swordsmen. This back-and-forth test was like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Ripples were born from the place where the stone fell and quickly spread to the entire lake. The waves of battle also dragged all the cultivators and swordsmen into it. Rumble! Ka-cha-cha! There was the sound of thunder and the flash of swords. When the first scream came from the mouth of a cultivator or a swordsman, it was immediately followed by an endless stream of screams. Every scream was the harvest of a life. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, hundreds of cultivators and swordsmen had already fallen from the two armies. At this time, the cruelty of the battle was different from that of Quan Jinshan. That was because Quan Jinshan and Tu Hong had a premeditated plan to lure the swordsmen into a trap. Other than a simple defense to not arouse the swordsman's suspicion, he did not send most of the Sky Patrol City's disciples into the battle at all. Today, all the swordsmen were mobilized. All the cultivators did not hold back. They used their flying swords to fight against the magic tools without the slightest mercy. In Li Chun's hand was a thin sword that was like spring water. The jade-green sword light seemed to be able to subdue almost everything. His figure broke free from a flickering lightning net. With a slight wave of his hand, the jade-green light flashed out and pierced into the eyes of a tall, dark, and thin cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect several dozen feet away. There was a flash of brilliance in front of the cultivator's eyes. The defensive yellow talisman was immediately corroded by the spring water, creating a flaw smaller than a needle's eye. However, it was this flaw that allowed the sword light to penetrate and rush into the cultivator's right eye at lightning speed. With a scream, the cultivator naturally used his right hand to cover his right eye. However, he only had time to cover his right eye before the green light pierced through the back of his head. The cultivator did not shout another word and his figure fell into the dust. Humph! Li Chun snorted coldly. His figure suddenly sank and his two hands stretched out. Above the cultivator that he had just killed, there were two other Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. They had just joined forces to kill a swordsman. Just as they were about to take the swordsman's storage pouch, his two sword lights pierced towards them from below. Attack! These two disciples were also Foundation Establishment late-stage cultivators. When Li Chun's flying sword approached, the two of them had already sensed it. They turned around almost at the same time. One was a palm-sized butterfly and the other was a lightning dart that was like a spear. Both of them flashed with lightning and struck Li Chun's flying sword. Sizzle! There was a burst of thunder. Li Chun's flying sword was surrounded by lightning. Moreover, the lightning spread along the direction of the flying sword and rushed towards Li Chun. The two of them sneered and simultaneously urged their magic tools to attack Li Chun. Go! Li Chun's figure abruptly made a turn, and a thin stream of water emerged from beneath his feet, carrying his figure as it rapidly rushed underground. Where do you think you're going? The two Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples shouted. At the same time, they urged their flying techniques to chase after him. However, when the two of them rushed out for about 4 zhang, the disciple who used the lightning dart suddenly became alert. The lightning dart in his hand suddenly flew to the side and directly pierced towards a swordsman who was fighting with a Mozong Mountain disciple about 2 zhang to the left. Pooh! The swordsman was simply caught off guard. The sword light around his body flashed rapidly and was unable to block the lightning dart. The lightning dart pierced through his body. Looking at the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple, he used force in his hand and threw the swordsman's corpse to the ground. Then, he suddenly rushed into the air. Almost at the same time, the other disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect who was chasing after Li Chun suddenly paused. The defensive brilliance at his waist flashed rapidly, and then his entire body was cut in half. This disciple didn't even have the chance to scream before he died. Looking at the sky, an extremely dim sword light flashed. It was like a thin thread of sword light had shrunk into the hand of a Void Heaven Sword School's disciple. It was the other disciple, Spring Equinox. However, at this moment, a tremendous force erupted from Spring Breeze's body. Spring Equinox had just retracted his sword radiance and had yet to stabilize his body. The force of the impact sent Spring Equinox flying. Spring Equinox wasn't the only one affected. Even the swordsmen and cultivators within 100 feet radius were sent flying in all directions by the force of the impact. Spring Equinox scanned with his divine sense and knew that a cultivator had detonated a magic treasure to take down the opponent with him. Unfortunately, the sword cultivator was extremely agile and had already dodged. Only his flying sword was slightly damaged, but Spring Equinox and the others were affected. Spring Equinox calmed down a little and was about to use his divine sense to scan elsewhere when he suddenly felt a chill from his back. He was so shocked that he didn't have time to use his divine sense. The sword light around him shone brightly, and he was about to rush up. His right hand shook behind him, and the flying sword that was as thin as a thread also rushed out. However, he was still too late. Seeing that he had just flown 3 feet away, before his speed reached its limit, a fist-sized blue lightning ball streaked across the sky and sank into his back like a meteor. Although the sword light of Spring Equinox's protection was surging with all its might, extending and contracting like the quills of a hedgehog, the lightning ball still easily penetrated it. With a loud bang, the ball of lightning exploded inside Spring Equinox's body. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. How could Spring Equinox still have a chance to live? Several hundred feet away, an Imperial Thundersex disciple holding a ring-shaped magic treasure was dumbfounded as he watched all of this. He was controlling the magic treasure to send out a ball of lightning to attack a nearby swordsman. Who would have thought that after the swordsman barely dodged, the swordsman would quickly attack him? He was in a panic and didn't have time to control the ball of lightning with his divine sense. As a result, Spring Equinox was killed. Chapter 2504. However, this Imperial Thundersex disciple's good luck had come to an end. Just as he was dumbstruck looking at his battle achievement, his opponent waved her hand and a black earth pillar smashed horizontally towards his chest. This disciple came to his senses and hurriedly activated his magic treasure. A small lightning ball was born and rushed to the front of the earth pillar. With a loud boom, the earth pillar was blasted into pieces. But just as the smoke and dust were flying and the earth was scattering, an incomparably black sword light as thin as a hair rushed from the earth pillar to the front of this Imperial Thundersex disciple. The Imperial Thundersex disciple's magic power was obviously exhausted. His divine sense was careless and was penetrated by the sword light. The brilliance protecting his body flickered slightly and was annihilated. Following the sword light entering his chest, that disciple only let out a light groan and died. Strings of blood splattered and one life after another was reaped by the sickle. Seeing such a situation, Wuxia looked at Guyu beside her and asked in a deep voice, "Guyu, Spring Equinox has already fallen. Many swordsmen have also fallen. You still don't plan to take action?" Guyu's expression did not change as she shook her head slightly. "This junior will not take action. In this junior's eyes, these lives are all innocent. They should not have fallen here. They should have roared in the 9 heavens and galloped freely between this heaven and earth. But for this so-called Tao cultivator great war, their originally free lives have no choice but to be tied up here." "Sai, perhaps you are right." Wuxia looked at her disciples falling one by one and felt helpless in her heart. She could only sigh and said, "It's a pity that this sword cannot transcend like you. Since this sword is stationed in 7 Extremes mountain range, then I must ensure that I complete the orders of the Sword Region Master." Saying that, Wuxia raised her head and took a deep breath. Sword light shot out from her body and her originally dark skin seemed to be plated with a layer of silver light at this moment. Guyu knew that Wuxia was about to take action and hurriedly flew back several feet. She stood quietly and watched coldly. It was as if this war had nothing to do with her. Buzz buzz. The sword light on Wuxia's body blossomed and continued to elongate. As the sword light flashed, the sound of the sword humming also reverberated. When the sword light was only 20 feet long, Wuxia's entire body charged into the air. She drew an extremely beautiful arc in the air and charged towards Xianxia, who was several li away. The sword light was like lightning, streaking across the sky. Not only did the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi rapidly gather, it even pierced through the air. A rumbling sound came from the sword light along with Wuxia's flight. As Wuxia's figure approached, a cloud-like sword light appeared from Wuxia's body. Wuxia's sword intent was actually a pure and flawless white cloud. Xianxia had long been paying attention to Wuxia's actions. When he saw that her actions had caused such a huge commotion, he muttered in his heart. However, what else could he do now? Xianxia opened his hand and a 3-foot-long purple golden hammer flew out from his body. The head of the purple golden hammer was 1 foot long and the runes on it were very deep. Electric light flowed between the runes, and the flickering purple light couldn't help but rush out of the purple golden hammer. It rushed into the air, and issued a crackling sound. The 2-feet-long hammer handle slightly rotated, and the world's spiritual energy was sucked in like a whale. Rise, Xianxia's white hair suddenly scattered in all directions as a powerful aura surged out. He lifted the purple golden hammer in his right hand and similarly flew up, charging towards Wuxia with a speed that was not inferior to hers. Following Xianxia's flight, a hammer shadow with lightning lingering around it slowly formed in front of the purple golden hammer. When the two collided, it was already 1 foot long. Boom! A loud sound rang out. It was definitely an earth-shattering movement. The purple golden hammer finally collided with the white cloud sword. The first round of collision between the two golden core realm swordsmen and cultivators created a huge sound wave in the air. Amidst the sound wave, the 1-foot-long white cloud was struck by 70%. The purple golden hammer shadow of the same size was also shaved off by more than 80%. Looking at Xianxia and Wuxia, the two's figures were even faster than when they flew over. They retreated like bullets and were only able to stabilize themselves after being knocked back 1,000 feet. The dozens of cultivators and swordsmen below them were also affected and lost their balance, falling into the air. Those who were lucky barely managed to stabilize themselves. Those who were unlucky had long been killed by the nearby enemies. Not only that, the white cloud was like a strand of black hair. Every strand of cloud was a ray of sword light. After rushing into the purple golden hammer, it immediately revealed a ferocious appearance and danced rapidly like a jellyfish with countless tentacles. The purple golden hammer wasn't any weaker than the white cloud sword. The purple golden hammer was originally a shadow made of lightning, but now it suddenly exploded. The lightning pierced into the white clouds like flying swords. Wherever the lightning went, the sword lights disappeared like they were melting water. See, Wuxia's eyes narrowed and she took in a breath of cold air. The sword essence around her body circulated rapidly and the white cloud sword turned into a white ribbon, spiraling towards Xianxia. After the first round of probing, Xianxia had some confidence in his heart. Wuxia's attack was definitely not for show. He was indeed slightly inferior. However, Wuxia was using the white cloud sword. The sword light was like silk and was extremely good for defense. But in a real fight, it did not seem to be compatible with a swordsman's one-hit kill. In this aspect, Xianxia's purple golden hammer had a slight advantage. In addition, the lightning of the purple gold hammer seemed to be the nemesis of the white cloud sword. Just one bolt of lightning was enough to annihilate several sword beams. In terms of magical treasures, Xianxia had the upper hand again. As the battle continued, Xianxia had the confidence to win. Seeing the white cloud sword coming towards him, Xianxia's face showed disdain. He thought to himself, female swordsmen are no different from female cultivators. They both do superficial things. Although this ribbon is beautiful, what's the use? As he thought, he waved his purple golden hammer. Attack! Lightning flashed on the purple golden hammer. It split into several parts and hit the white cloud sword. In an instant, the ribbon was broken into several pieces. However, at the same time that the white cloud sword was broken into several pieces, Wuxia's sword art moved again. With a buzzing sound, the several pieces of the ribbon suddenly exploded, forming hundreds of flying swords that pierced towards Xianxia. The sound of the flying swords piercing through the air was extremely sharp. Even a golden core cultivator as strong as Xianxia's expression changed. At this moment, he finally understood the power of the white cloud sword. Separa. Xianxia did not dare to be negligent. With a wave of his purple golden hammer, he activated his transcendence energy. The purple golden hammer shone brightly and a huge shadow of the purple golden hammer emerged, enveloping Xianxia within. The hundreds of sword lights pierced into the shadow, but were all blocked by the lightning within the shadow. Ha ha ha, Xianxia laughed. Sword cultivators are only though. Seeing this, Wuxia's eyes unconsciously narrowed. She seemed to have made a decision. After all, the thunder-controlling sex lightning elemental spells had always been the most feared by sword cultivators. Xianxia's purple golden hammer was even more powerful. Her white cloud sword was indeed no match for it. However, things still went beyond Xianxia's expectations. Although the hundreds of sword lights were blocked by the purple golden hammer's defense, they did not dissipate like before. Instead, after colliding with the lightning, they were reflected back. Following Wuxia's sword art, the sword lights repeatedly collided and pierced out. It was like a ball of sword light enveloping Xianxia's body. At the same time, this sword light also consumed the lightning. In a few breaths, the lightning shadow of the purple golden hammer began to dim. Could it be? This woman wants to compete with me in transcendence energy? Xianxia was slightly surprised. He understood very well why sword cultivators had an advantage in a fight with cultivators. It was because their attack power was strong. And cultivators could fight sword cultivators because their transcendence energy was generally stronger than sword cultivators. Wuxia was competing with Xianxia in transcendence energy. He was afraid that she was using her weakness against his strength. It was absolutely impossible for Wuxia to do such a thing. However, in the next moment, the sword lights became more and more dazzling. It lingered in the surrounding space for hundreds of feet. Not only was it impossible to look at, but the whistling spiritual energy of heaven and earth could cut anything in the space into pieces. This made Xianxia even more surprised. However, Xianxia also withdrew his original intention. He mobilized his gold core, and his transcendence energy methodically poured into the purple golden hammer. While stabilizing the defense, he would casually strike from time to time. And this seemingly casual strike would always create a gap of a few feet in the white cloud swords within hundreds of feet. The originally smooth sword lights were sluggish again. Just when Xianxia and Wuxia's battle seemed to have entered a stalemate, a cold divine sense swept over from the Seven Extremes ridge. That divine sense seemed to have no emotions, and it was as bone-chilling as a snow region. When it swept over Xianxia, it actually made Xianxia tremble slightly. At the same time, his transcendence energy was also slightly stagnant. Third-grade illusory sword? Xianxia was shocked. He immediately understood Wuxia's intention. She only needed to defend the formation and delay him. Once the third-grade illusory swordsman arrived, how could he still have a way to survive? However, things were out of Xianxia's expectations. That cold divine sense only swept over him and hovered slightly. Then, it swept over the entire battlefield and left in disdain. This. Xianxia was stunned, but his heart was also beating fast. With such a fierce person overseeing the Seven Extremes ridge, it would be difficult for him to take advantage of the tens of thousands of Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. Left and right is to find out the actual situation. Xianxia's mind changed again. There is no need to pester her. Wait until this female swordsman is seriously injured. Please don't take her life. Just when Xianxia was tender like water, but the knot in his heart could not be dispelled, suddenly, another powerful divine sense swept over from behind him. Gold core. Late-stage teacher? Xianxia sensed that divine sense, and it came from behind him. That familiar divine sense really made him want to cry tears of joy. However, what made Xianxia not know whether to laugh or cry was that this divine sense also swept over a group of people and even the entire battlefield. It swept over and swept over the other side of the Seven Extremes ridge. It was as disdainful as the swordsman. Although this divine sense was disdainful, Xianxia. No, all the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples on the battlefield, Missouri Songshan's and Tongyi Sect's disciples were greatly shocked. They knew that it was not only them who were fighting here, but also their gold core teacher. Chapter 2505. A late-stage golden elixir realm cultivator, in a situation where the two armies were evenly matched, definitely had the power to turn the tide of the battle. Xianxia was relieved, but Wuxia's expression changed greatly. Seeing that Xianxia was a little distracted and the smile on his face, Wuxia's eyes narrowed and the sword light around her body once again flourished. That dazzling sword light forced Xianxia to involuntarily close his eyes. When Xianxia's divine sense swept out, he turned pale with fright. How is this possible? You're only a first-grade illusory sword realm cultivator. How can you transform into a sword? Indeed, Wuxia's figure had already vanished. A cluster of dense white clouds congealed into a flying sword appeared where Wuxia was previously standing. The sword splendor that was previously surging around Xianxia's body was now emitting a shrill cry. All the sword's splendor frantically converged. The flying swords of several nearby swordsmen were also uncontrollably sucked over. Not good. When Xianxia saw that Wuxia actually had the secret of transforming into a sword, he was greatly alarmed. Almost without thinking, his figure abruptly rose. Taking advantage of the fact that Wuxia's sword light had converged, he waved the purple golden hammer. Balls of lightning were activated as if they were not spiritual stones and smashed towards Wuxia. He took advantage of the situation and wanted to escape towards the Seven Extremes Ridge. However, he was still a little late. The flying sword condensed from white clouds rapidly swelled and then rapidly shrank. When it had condensed to the size of an ordinary flying sword, it suddenly expanded. A white rainbow like the sun rushed towards the balls of lightning that Xianxia had conjured. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A series of loud noises enveloped the battlefield of tens of thousands of people. That white rainbow passed through all the balls of lightning at an incredible speed in the blink of an eye and directly pierced towards Xianxia's back. Fight! Xianxia's heart shrank. He immediately knew that the time to decide the outcome of the battle had arrived. His golden elixir rapidly rotated and all the vital energy rushed towards his meridians. His transcendence energy then poured into the purple golden hammer. Dang! Like the sound of a golden drum, the white rainbow struck the purple golden hammer, creating a 3-inch deep crack. Moreover, the white rainbow's momentum didn't decrease, but its direction was changed by the purple golden hammer. With a pu sound, the golden light around Xianxia's body suddenly brightened, and then it was extinguished. That white rainbow actually went under his armpit and passed through. See, Xianxia's natal magic treasure was damaged. His primordial spirit violently fluctuating. The white rainbow even broke through his golden elixir's defense and severely injured his body. As blood spurted out, his body staggered as his body's injured. Let's go! Xianxia sucked in a breath of cold air. He watched as the white streak of light passed through his body and several other Imperial Thundersect disciples before slowly coming to a stop. He didn't dare to stay any longer. Enduring the pain, he activated his flying technique and fled to the other side of the Seven Extremes mountain range. Thousands of Imperial Thundersect, Mo Sang Mountain, and Tong Yi Sect's disciples had already died. When they saw this, they also retreated while fighting, moving towards the other side of the Seven Extremes Ridge. Moreover, that incomparably sharp white rainbow slowly stopped in mid-air. The sword's light gradually converged, revealing Wuxia's red face. Wuxia had forcefully activated her secret technique to transform into a sword, causing great damage to her body. Unfortunately, Xianxia's purple gold hammer was too powerful, and that lightning net was too arrogant. Wuxia's attack, which she was originally very confident in, did not succeed, and could only heavily injure Xianxia. Looking at Xianxia stumbling and flying into the distance, Wuxia waved her hand and sneered, "Chase!" Yes, the swordsmen who were originally chasing the cultivator also had high morale. Many 6th-grade sword leaders responded loudly and commanded the 10,000 swordsmen to chase after the cultivator. On the other side of the Seven Extremes Ridge, the battle situation was different. The Washing Flower Sect's leader was a graceful female cultivator who had a technique to retain her beauty. Her name was Bright Moon. This Bright Moon maiden's cultivation was at the peak of the early gold core stage. The magic treasure in her hand was also called Bright Moon. This Bright Moon emitted a pure white brilliance under the influence of the Bright Moon Lady's magic power. It lit up the sky within 1,000 feet. The brilliance was extremely cold, and it was compatible with the cold wind of the snowy highlands. Its power was multiplied. The white flying sword was a white lotus, similarly emitting a pure white sword's light. The battle between Bright Moon Maiden and Bright Moon Maiden was much more interesting than the battle between Xianxia and Wuxia. However, the outcome of the battle was different. Just before the Seven Extremes Ridge's cold divine scent swept over, Bright Moon Maiden's white lotus sword transformed into a white lotus. The lotus petals spiraled towards Bright Moon Maiden. The sword's light on the lotus petals was like lightning. Not only did it emit a dazzling brilliance, it even pierced the air with a zzz sound. Moreover, each lotus petal seemed to be faintly connected. As they flew, they moved with each other. Not only was the flight path more difficult to distinguish, Even the flying speed gradually increased, far surpassing that of ordinary flying swords. The two had already fought for a long time. Bright Moon Maiden saw the power of the White Lotus Sword and knew that Yunbai had already used her full strength. Thus, she took a deep breath and bit the tip of her tongue. With a pu sound, she spat out a mouthful of essence blood onto Bright Moon Maiden. Whoa! With a sound like a lone wolf howling on a snowy night, Bright Moon Maiden suddenly turned into an oval shape and rapidly expanded above her head. Go! Bright Night Maiden immediately formed hand seals. The gold core in her body spun faster. True essence poured into her meridians. The magic power was like a tide rushing into Bright Moon Maiden. As the magic power poured into Bright Moon Maiden, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth also crazily poured in. Go! When Bright Moon Maiden formed hand seals, she pointed her finger and Bright Moon Maiden flew out from her head. Like a meteor chasing after the moon, it shot towards the White Lotus Sword. Bright Moon Maiden flashed around Bright Moon Maiden. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed an extremely cold brilliance around Bright Moon Maiden. Ka-cha-cha as Bright Moon flew, the ice shards in the air shattered and fell. In the blink of an eye, Bright Moon Maiden was already close to White Lotus petals. Although it was still a foot away, the lotus petals suddenly condensed. As the lotus petals condensed, there was a wang sound of metal and stone. This sound was the sorrowful cry of the condensed sword light. It was trying its best to break free from the extreme coldness of the sword domain. But immediately after, with a series of kacha-kacha sounds, Bright Moon Maiden cut all the lotus petals apart. All the sword light was also split in half. Pang! With a loud sound, the magic weapon Full Moon finally hit the bottom of the lotus petal. On the body of the White Lotus Sword, the heart of the White Lotus Sword also suddenly produced a lotus-like sword light, heavily colliding with the full moon. The brilliance of the full moon was completely restrained, and the shock wave sent the magic weapon flying. Bright Moon Maiden's face was also flushed red. Clearly, her primordial spirit was somewhat damaged. Looking at White Lotus Sword, it was even worse. The magic treasure, Bright Moon, had not only destroyed Bai Lian's sword form, revealing the flying sword, but it had also sent the flying sword flying diagonally. Several deep cracks had appeared on the pure white sword's body. Pooh! White Lotus Sword was damaged, and Yunbai was also injured. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her face was pale. Humph! Sword cultivators are only though. Bright Moon Maiden's eyebrows were raised, and she coldly spat out these words. Her handsome face was even more disdainful, and the redness on her face was even more beautiful in contrast to her pure white face. Yunbai originally wanted to leave a few sword scars on Bright Moon Maiden's face, but now she was even more embarrassed and angry. She gritted her teeth. Although she was seriously injured, she still forcibly controlled White Lotus Sword. The White Lotus Sword streaked across the air several tens of feet away, and very abruptly pierced towards the beautiful female cultivator in the distance in a fiery red robe. Wasn't that female cultivator Fairy Xianxia? Fairy Xianxia was originally fighting with a 4th-grade swordsman with a magic treasure in hand. That magic treasure had already wrapped around the swordsman's arm. Just as she was about to kill him, Yunbai's White Lotus Sword suddenly rushed over, frightening Fairy Xianxia so much that she hurriedly retreated. She couldn't even protect her magic treasure. With a C sound, the White Lotus Sword slashed across Fairy Xia's arm. It easily pierced through a flaw in her defense, and a deep bloody scar was left on Fairy Xia's arm. Blood immediately gushed out, dyeing Fairy Xia's pure white skin red, and even her fiery red Taoist robe was dyed red. Not only that, the White Lotus Sword did not stop after injuring Fairy Xianxia. It rushed to the front of the swordsman whose arm was bound by the magic treasure, and suddenly spun, cutting Fairy Xia's magic treasure into several pieces. Fairy Xia's figure stopped in mid-air. She reached out her hand and swallowed a pill. Then, her almond-shaped eyes flashed with ruthlessness. She slapped her forehead, and with a phoenix cry, more than 10 feet in size flew out of her body. Oh! Seeing Fairy Xia's ice phoenix celestial body appear, Yunbai was slightly taken aback. But soon after, she pointed her finger, and the White Lotus Sword turned into a stream of light and rushed into the air. Its target was Fairy Xia's ice phoenix celestial body. The ice phoenix let out another long cry, and the sound shook the surroundings. At the same time, it flapped its 2 wings, and its entire body retreated slightly. The huge phoenix head retracted with all its might, and then suddenly stretched out again. A deep blue brilliance was spat out from the ice phoenix's mouth, and like water from the 9 heavens, it blocked the white lotus sword. The white lotus sword was hit by the deep blue brilliance, and the sword light immediately shrunk. It tried its best to fly forward, but as if it was stuck in a quagmire, it could not move forward at all. Xianxia primordial water? Yunbai was shocked at first. Clearly, she was very surprised that a female cultivator in the late foundation establishment stage would have Xianxia primordial water. But later, when the Xianxia primordial water seemed to be endless, her face was not only shocked, but shocked and frightened. Because not only did the Xianxia primordial water trap her white lotus sword, it also quickly sealed her surroundings, as if it wanted to trap her. Oh no! I shouldn't have vented my anger on this female cultivator. Yunbai was filled with regret. She knew clearly that if she had not offended Fairy Xianxia, how could she have made her use her Ice Phoenix celestial body to challenge her, an illusory swordsman? And now, not to mention that she was heavily injured, even the white lotus sword was trapped by the Xianxia primordial water. Yunbai might not be able to fight against Fairy Xianxia. Escape! Yunbai immediately had this thought. Then, she tried her best to activate her sword energy. The white lotus sword shone brightly and rushed into the Xianxia primordial water, wanting to fly back to Yunbai's hand. Chapter 2506. At this moment, the cold spiritual will swept past where Clipchamp was. It swept past Fairy Xianxia and the others and immediately locked onto Fairy Xianxia. Oh no! Fairy Xianxia sensed the strong spiritual will and was shocked. Her Ice Phoenix celestial body flapped its wings and flew up in an attempt to escape. Immediately after, the second spiritual will, which was equally strong, swept past where Clipchamp was. Similarly, when the spiritual will swept past Fairy Xianxia and her arm, which had just stopped bleeding, it immediately stopped. A kind of extreme anger was born from the divine sense. Darling Xiao? Sensing the familiar spiritual will and the anger in it, Fairy Xianxia was stunned. Why did he come back to 7 Extremes Ridge? However, Xiao Hua's spiritual will had already been concealed. If not for Fairy Xiao's close observation, she would not have been able to detect it so easily. Just as Fairy Xiao was deep in thought, a blue figure rapidly flew over from the direction of the 7 Extremes mountain range. Before the figure could get close, a powerful aura gradually spread throughout the entire battlefield. It was like the gentle breeze before the arrival of a tsunami. Fairy Xianxia was shocked when she saw Yunbai suddenly attacking Fairy Xianxia. However, her primordial spirit was also damaged and she could not save her in time. She had just activated her magic treasure Bright Moon and saw Fairy Xianxia escape danger. Although she suffered a flesh wound, it was still better than dying. She heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately after, Fairy Xianxia released her Ice Phoenix celestial body. Fairy Xianxia was stunned. Ordinary cultivators only needed to release their celestial body, and their other powers would be restricted. They could not even use other spells. Fairy Xianxia releasing her celestial body against the illusory swordsman was indeed unwise. Of course, each person's Dharma body was different, and their supernatural powers were different as well. Some could increase their powers, while others had special supernatural powers. However, it was rare to see someone like Fairy Xianxia, who could control a magical treasure directly. When Fairy Xiao's Ice Phoenix celestial body spat out innate primordial water, not only trapping Yunbai's white lotus sword, but also trapping Yunbai, Fairy Xiao's lips curled into a smile as she thought to herself, as expected of a fairy. Therefore, her magic treasure, Bright Moon, slowed down for a moment. She wanted to give Fairy Xianxia the credit for killing the illusory swordswoman. While she was hesitating, the blue-robed swordsman's divine sense swept over and his figure appeared. Attack! Lady Mingyu did not dare to be careless. She knew that as long as the blue-robed swordsman came to the battlefield, her side would definitely have no chance of winning. Moreover, Yunbai would definitely be able to escape from danger. Which fellow Taoist spirit sense is this? Similarly, when Lady Bright Moon shot out her magic weapon, Bright Moon, she also sensed Xiao Hua's divine sense and was slightly surprised. However, even with Xiao Hua's appearance, the best opportunity to kill Yunbai would be missed. She endured the damage to her origin spirit and circulated her true origin with all her might. The magic treasure once again took the shape of an oval and flew towards Yunbai. "Scoundrel, how dare you!" The blue-robed swordsman's divine sense did not leave the vicinity of Fairy Xianxia. When he saw Lady Bright Moon using her magic treasure, he could not help but be enraged. His divine sense left Fairy Xianxia and scanned the magic treasure, Bright Moon. Instantly, a strange feeling came from Lady Bright Moon's divine sense. It was as though she had lost her connection with the magic treasure. How is this possible? Lady Bright Moon turned pale with fright. This magic treasure, Bright Moon, was her natal magic treasure. If the blue-robed swordsman fought with her on the spot and used his divine sense to sever the connection between her origin spirit and the magic treasure, she could understand. But at this moment, the blue-robed swordsman was still extremely far away. However, how could a strand of divine sense have such a divine sense? Even if he is a nascent soul master, it is impossible for him to have such a method, right? Lady Bright Moon's heart could not help but jump. "Xianxia, hurry up and kill that guy." Lady Bright Moon tried her best to use her divine sense to fight with the blue-robed swordsman's divine sense in an attempt to regain control of the magic treasure. At the same time, she hurriedly ordered Fairy Xianxia. Yes, this disciple understands. Fairy Xia's face was also flushed red. It wasn't that she hadn't used her Ice Phoenix Dharma body, but she had tried to refine the tidal bead into her Ice Phoenix Dharma body after listening to Xiao Hua's advice. Her Ice Phoenix physique was clearly stimulated by the evil tremor bloodline, and was completely different from Xiao Hua's. Furthermore, it did not have any origin spirit fused into it. It was already pretty good that she was able to control the tidal bead to release the connate primordial water in such a short period of time. If she really wanted to use the connate primordial water to kill Yunbai, it would be a little too difficult. Seeing Fairy Xianxia activate her Ice Phoenix physique and clumsily control the tidal bead to channel the connate primordial water towards Yunbai, Bright Moon sighed in her heart. She is too clever for her own good. If she had directly used her divine sense to control the magic treasure, wouldn't she have killed this ugly sword cultivator long ago? Yunbai, who was within the connate primordial water, was surrounded by sword light. She did not dare to release her divine sense too far, and was doing her best to resist the connate primordial water. Although the sword light was gradually being corroded by the connate primordial water, she was already overjoyed that she was not killed. Seeing the blue-robed swordsman's figure gradually becoming clearer, that extremely strange orange face was filled with anger. Even those reddish-yellow eyes that were different from ordinary people were about to spit fire. Fairy Xianxia was also very anxious. With a GA sound, her Ice Phoenix physique cried out again, and its two phoenix claws moved rapidly, as if it was really forming a seal. Instantly, the connate primordial water that had completely submerged Yunbai suddenly produced a several zhang tall wave, and slammed down on Yunbai's head. Rumble rumble, the sword light protecting Yunbai was instantly reduced by more than half. Yunbai's face turned pale again. This was because Fairy Xianxia had already figured out that as long as she used the connate primordial water again, not only would the sword light around her be completely corroded by the connate primordial water, but her body would also be corroded by the connate primordial water until not even a single bone would be left. "Senior brother Ji, save me!" At the critical moment of life and death, Yunbai could no longer care about the dignity of an illusory swordsman, and could not help but cry out for help. Mingyu tried her best to control the moon, but was unable to do anything. Furthermore, as the blue-robed swordsman flew closer, Mingyu's magic treasure Mingyu was getting more and more out of control. Mingyu was so anxious that she almost wanted to urge Fairy Xianxia again, but she also understood that this matter could not be resolved by her urging. If she urged Fairy Xianxia again, it would be a burden to her. Rather than that, she might as well keep her mouth shut. Indeed, Fairy Xianxia waved her phoenix claws again, and a faint ripple of magic power was emitted. Heaven and earth spiritual energy flocked together, and the connate primordial water was raised by her again. "How dare you!" At this moment, the blue-robed swordsman's cold snort could be heard. Mingyu's heart trembled, let alone Fairy Xianxia. Her body trembled, and the waves that she had raised retreated. "Quick!" Mingyu's heart shrank, and she could not help but remind, "Stay true to your heart, do not be disturbed by external sounds." Although that was what she said, it was still extremely difficult to do it. Fairy Xianxia gritted her teeth, closed her eyes again, and the ice phoenix celestial body waved its claws again. Humph! The blue-robed swordsman's cold snort seemed to be much closer. Mingyu was shocked, and she raised her head to look. Ah! She could not help but cry out. She saw that the blue-robed swordsman had turned into a rainbow, and that blue rainbow swept across the sky, and shot towards her. This swordsman is at least a grade 3 illusory sword. Seeing that the swordsman could turn into a rainbow, Mingyu could not help but groan and said anxiously, "Xianxia, quickly release that bitch, we will retreat now." Saying that, Mingyu leaped up, and without even caring about her magic treasure, she scanned the entire battlefield with her divine sense, and was about to give the order to retreat. Seeing that an illusory swordsman was about to die in her hands, Fairy Xianxia could not help but bite her lips. She knew very well that if Yunbai had not been severely injured in the fight with Mingyu, she would not have had this opportunity, and there would not be such an excellent opportunity in this battle. Thinking about her own master, and what she wanted to do in this battle, this was an excellent excuse. Rumble, a thunderous sound came from behind Fairy Xianxia and the others. This thunderous sound came from afar, and it pierced through the 9 heavens, as if a god's anger had descended upon the 7 extremes ridge. Xiao Lang is here. Fairy Xia's heart relaxed, and the ice phoenix celestial body spread its wings, and its claws moved gracefully. The Xiantian primordial water that could not be controlled previously was now as smooth as the feathers of the ice phoenix celestial body. Following Fairy Xia's will, a huge wave of several feet high was set off, and it smashed towards Yunbai. "Bitch, this sword will not let you off even if I become a ghost." Yunbai really lived up to her name. Seeing that the blue-robed swordsman was already in front of her, but the wave had already been set off, Yunbai's face turned pale, and her lips trembled as she spat out a few vicious words. Hua, the wave of water smashed down, and the countless tiny whirlpools within the Xiantian primordial water instantly corroded Yunbai's sword light, and the half-foot-long white sword light disappeared, revealing Yunbai's body. Tremble, within the rainbow, the blue-robed swordsman let out a furious roar. An extremely strong sealing force came from a mile away, completely suppressing the area within 100 feet of Fairy Xianxia. The ferocious Xiantian primordial water was completely frozen by this restrictive force. Even Fairy Xia's ice phoenix celestial body could not move at all. The most dangerous thing was that the Xiantian primordial water that was smashing towards Yunbai was less than half a foot away from her head. Yunbai's eyes were filled with extreme despair. As this powerful restrictive force came through the air, Fairy Xia's magic treasure, Bright Moon, immediately loosened. She hurriedly controlled Bright Moon to turn around, but she knew that her magic power was not enough to break this restrictive force. She could only look at Fairy Xianxia with pity, and with a slap of her hand, a crimson message talisman appeared in her hand. At this moment, a cold laugh rumbled like thunder. How majestic, how murderous, how powerful! Immediately, dark clouds rolled above Fairy Xia's head, and hundreds of thick heavenly lightning bolts suddenly appeared. Ka-cha-cha, the heavenly lightning bolt struck down, and hit the restrictive force that had completely restrained Fairy Xianxia and the Xiantian primordial water. Chapter 2507. Boom! With a huge tremor, the restrictive force was almost completely shattered by the heavenly thunder. Countless tiny threads of lightning flickered around Fairy Xianxia. As the restrictive force was shattered, the innate primordial water annihilated Yunbai in a flash. Yunbai only had time to scream and her eyes were dazed, as if her divine sense had been lost in the innate primordial water. Furthermore, the flesh and blood on her body quickly dissipated, and the exposed white bones were also quickly annihilated by the blue waves. Hiss! Seeing this, Mingyu could not help but gasp. She had long heard of the ferocious reputation of the innate primordial water. Seeing it today, it really lived up to its name and was even worse. Then, Mingyu quietly put away the message talisman in her hand. She raised her head and looked at the sky. A few miles away, there was still the rumbling of thunder, but in the sky, there was a small figure stepping on the sound of thunder, calmly rushing over. This is... which senior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect? Mingyu's eyes lit up. She knew that this cultivator from afar was using the thunder escape technique of the Imperial Thunder Sect. The pure thunder control technique just now could only be used by the Imperial Thunder Sect's late Golden Core stage disciples, or even nascent Soul stage disciples. Looking at the blue-robed swordsman, who had flown half a mile to the battlefield and saw that his restrictive technique had been destroyed by Xiao Hua's heavenly thunder and Yunbai had died. His figure also stopped in midair, coldly looking at the source of the sound of thunder. When Xiao Hua came closer, a trace of disappointment flashed across Ming Yu's eyes. She saw that Xiao Hua was only the height of an ordinary person and was a little fat. The Imperial Thunder Sect's robe was bulging, and he looked very uncomfortable. Looking at his appearance, he was abnormally ordinary. If he was thrown into EG, no one would be able to recognize him. However, Ming Yu did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly went forward and saluted. Ming Yu of the Huanhua sect greets senior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Emma, Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Go and command the battle. Leave this guy to me." Seeing that Xiao Hua did not mention his name, Ming Yu was even more disappointed. She could only whisper, "Yes, Ming Yu understands." At this moment, Fairy Xianxia had already broken free from the remaining shackles. She barely managed to grab the storage pouch that had not been corroded by the Xiantian primordial water and retracted the Ice Phoenix celestial body into her body. An unprecedented sense of exhaustion emerged from within her body. "I really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Fairy Xianxia smiled bitterly. "What my dear Xiao can do, I may not be able to do." However, when she turned her head to look at Xiao Hua, she was stunned again. Xiao Hua. That's right. How could the current Xiao Hua be her lover? However, when Fairy Xianxia saw Xiao Hua's unintentional glance at her, she came to a realization. This is Sister's sky-stealing sun-swapping secret technique. Back then, Big Sister could only barely change her appearance, but Xiao Lang could actually transform into such a person. Unfortunately, no matter how he changed his appearance, the look in his eyes could not be concealed. Hee. Thinking of this, Fairy Xianxia smiled sweetly. She reached out her hand again and took out an ordinary water-type magic treasure from her storage pouch. She raised it into the air and flew into another battle. However, Fairy Xia's action of killing Yunbai was too shocking. The swordsmen and cultivators around her had all seen it. Which swordsman would still fight with her? After killing a few swordsmen who could not escape, Fairy Xianxia took a deep breath and stood upright in mid-air. Bright Moon's opponent, Yunbai, had been killed by Fairy Xianxia. Fairy Xianxia couldn't use an ordinary swordsman to fight. She pointed her finger, and the transcendent artifact, Bright Moon, turned into a round disc and flew into the sky, covering her. She transmitted her voice softly. "Xianxia, come over here." "Yes, Martial Aunt Ming Yu." Fairy Xianxia smiled at her martial aunt who had always taken care of her and obediently flew into the light of Ming Yu. With this senior brother from the Imperial Thunder Sect, we have nothing to worry about in this battle. Ming Yu whispered to Ming Yu as she looked at Xiao Hua who had come over with his hands behind his back. There was not a trace of magic power around him. Although Ming Yu said so, the one who was worried about Xiao Hua was Fairy Xianxia. Fairy Xianxia still looked on worriedly. She looked at Xiao Hua who was standing quietly in the sky a few hundred feet away. In front of him, half a mile away, the blue-robed swordsman was also looking at Xiao Hua coldly. This blue-robed swordsman was completely different from Xiao Hua. Not only was his figure much taller, even his sturdiness was not something that Xiao Hua could compare to. What was special was that the swordsman's face and head were squarish. Even his sturdy body was squarish. Furthermore, where Xiao Hua stood, the cold wind blew, causing Xiao Hua's Taoist robe to flutter. Although the golden light around Xiao Hua's body was slightly overflowing, it was still slightly weaker than the blue-robed swordsman. This was because, within one zhang of the blue-robed swordsman, there was no sound of wind. Not even a corner of his blue robe was blown. It was as if it was a silent space. The two experts stood high in the sky. Even Ming Yu was a few hundred feet away from them, not to mention the ordinary cultivators and swordsmen. They all stayed far away, giving them a few hundred feet of space. They were afraid that the battle between the two would affect them. Fairy Xianxia bit her lips and muttered in her heart. After all, Xiao Hua's cultivation was only at the late foundation establishment stage. How could he face a third-grade illusory swordsman? Right at this moment, there was a small commotion in the distance. Oh? Ming Yu frowned and used her divine sense to scan the area. She saw that the injured Qianshang was fleeing here and the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple was fighting and retreating. She was stunned. Strange. The Imperial Thunder Sect's senior brother did not go to help the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple. Why did he come to the battlefield of my rinsing flower sect? This question. Not to mention the 100,000 people in the Seven Extremes Ridge. Even if all the cultivators in the Sky Patrol City were included, only the person beside Mingyu could answer it? Fairy Xia's heart was filled with unconcealable sweetness. Mingyu originally wanted to provide support to Xianxia. However, she saw that although Xianxia was seriously injured, there was no illusory swordsman chasing after him. Furthermore, the retreat of the Imperial Thunder Sect and the other two sects' disciples was orderly. It was not the kind of situation where an army would collapse like a mountain. Mingyu then sent out a few message talismans and ordered all the Huanhua sect's disciples to prepare to provide support. She then stood in midair with Fairy Xianxia and watched the fight between Xiaohua and the blue-robed swordsman. After all, as long as Xiaohua won, this battle would be more than half won. If Xiaohua lost, they could only escape. It was a pity that the two main characters of the battle were standing quietly in the air. Now, it had been the time to drink a cup of tea and they had no intention of fighting. Yes, how could they fight? How could Xiaohua fight with the blue-robed swordsman? No one knew what the blue-robed swordsman was thinking. Anyway, Xiaohua was very embarrassed at this moment. Although he had sacrificially refined the Kunlun mirror, that thing was too Hong's. There were tens of thousands of disciples in the field. If they were not careful, they would definitely reveal it. Could the Imperial Thunder Sect escape the investigation of the Shui region's spiritual master? Even if Xiaohua did not return to Sky Patrol City, he was afraid that it would be difficult to explain, right? Wishful staff? That was the thing that Xiaohua would be famous for in the future. Now that he had changed his appearance, it was even more impossible to take it out. In short, after thinking for a long time, Xiaohua really wanted to cry but had no tears. Forget it, I'll just stand here. Maybe I can scare this guy away. Xiaohua had the demeanor of a loud voice. However, the blue-robed swordsman was also shy. Obviously, the restrictive power of his hand was extremely powerful, but when it came close, it stopped. His red and yellow eyes stared at Xiaohua, but he did not make a move at all. This extremely strange scene did not change in the slightest until Xianxia staggered and flew to Mingyu's side. Seeing the Imperial Thunder Sect's Golden Core disciple standing in the air, Xianxia's eyes stared straight. Fellow Taoist Can. Mingyu inquired in a low voice, which senior brother of your sect is this? Xianxia's eyes stared straight at Xiaohua's side. With a voice that even he himself felt embarrassed, he replied, This Can does not know. This Can does not seem to know this senior brother. Isn't he the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple in this great battle? Mingyu asked curiously, looking at his Taoist robe. It seems so. Xianxia smiled bitterly. If it was an ordinary early-stage Golden Core disciple, this Can might not recognize him. But this senior brother. Just now, he seemed to have used the lightning evasion technique to control lightning. His cultivation, is at least late-stage Golden Core, right? How could this Can not recognize this kind of nascent soul senior brother in one step? However, this senior brother's cultivation. I'm afraid it's even higher than senior brother Qian Mo. How could he come to the Seven Extremes mountain range? If he's just passing by, then why is he wearing the Taoist robe of a participating disciple? Moreover, this Can was in a very dangerous situation just now. If not for risking my life, I almost died. How could senior brother come here? Xianxia had a stomach full of puzzlement, but this did not delay him from quickly taking a healing pill. With Mingyu by his side, with this Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple who was even more powerful than Qian Mo, he would not worry about Ruaxi's damaged sword origin. When Xianxia was taking the pill, Mingyu explained the situation just now in a low voice. Xianxia was so shocked that the jade bottle almost fell. What? Directly controlling heavenly lightning? Damn it, this should be a nascent soul cultivator's divine ability, right? Which senior brother from the Heavenly Thunder Palace is this? Xianxia's brain juice was being racked. It's that powerful? Mingyu was also slightly stunned. She did not expect the difficulty of controlling heavenly lightning to be so high. And that's right. Xianxia suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and said in a low voice, Our Imperial Thundersect's secret technique can only be used after reaching the nascent soul realm to communicate with the power of heaven and earth and control heavenly lightning. That's not right. Mingyu said curiously. This concubine has personally seen Imperial Thundersect's disciples using magic treasures, such as flying swords, to guide heavenly lightning down. TCH, how can that be compared? Xianxia curled his lips and said in a low voice. That's because there's a lightning-attracting array inside the magic treasure. What's even more lazy is that the magic treasure contains lightning and can borrow a bit of heavenly lightning's power to use. Fellow Taoist Mingyu. Didn't you see this senior brother of mine? He doesn't have any magic treasures or the like in his hands, but he's guiding lightning with his bare hands. This is a secret technique of my Imperial Thunder sect that is not passed on. There are only a few people in the sect who can do it. Hee hee. While speaking, Wuxia also flew over. Behind her in the distance was formless sword Gu Yu. Wuxia also looked at Xianxia and the blue-robed swordsman in astonishment. She then scanned the entire battlefield but did not see any trace of Yun Bai. When she found a sword cultivator to ask, her face revealed a miserable expression. At the same time, her furious gaze also fell on Mingyu. Chapter 2508. However, it was clear that the only sword cultivators were the blue-robed swordsman and Wuxia. As for the cultivators, there were 2 from the Imperial Thunder sect and 1 from the Huanhua sect. Wuxia was definitely not a match for Mingyu and Xianxia. Wuxia was very clear about the blue-robed swordsman's calmness. When she flew to the left and whispered a few words, the blue-robed swordsman didn't even frown, as if he didn't hear her. However, when Wuxia retreated, the blue-robed swordsman asked in a deep voice, I'm Ji Yi of the Copper Bell sect. Who are you from the Imperial Thunder sect? Nameless. Xianxia saw that this swordsman was actually so calm and still wanted to ask for his name. He hesitated slightly before answering. Nameless. Good name. Ji Yi didn't care whether Xianxia concealed his name or not. He nodded. This Ji can fight with an expert from the Imperial Thunder sect. This trip to the 7 Extremes Mountains was not in vain. Please, Xiaohua's pupils shrank, and he raised his hand. All right, since Brother Nameless won't fight, then, this Ji won't be polite. Ji Yi cupped his fists, and his body emitted a faint earthen yellow brilliance. His figure gradually accelerated as he flew towards Xiaohua. Oh? Xiaohua's magic power surged as he waved his hand. When he was about to take out a demonic tool, he saw the brilliance around Ji Ye's body and couldn't help but be stunned. This brilliance seems very familiar. Why is it similar to the cloud-suppressing seal? Copper Bell sect? Xiaohua suddenly thought of Ji Ye's self-introduction, and his eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. This young master knows. This Ji Yi is a tool cultivator. Ha ha ha, I understand. No wonder he didn't make the first move. It turns out, he doesn't have a magic weapon. He himself is a magic weapon. The corner of Xiaohua's mouth twitched. He finally understood why the 2 of them confronted each other for so long. However, he immediately felt a chill in his heart. He hadn't encountered many weapon cultivators in this battle, and the highest realm he had encountered was only at the drawing sword realm. However, this Ji Yi actually had a cultivation of the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm, and he had refined a magic treasure into his body. Xiaohua really lacked this kind of experience in direct combat with magic treasures. Looking at Ji Ye's body, the earthen yellow brilliance became increasingly brilliant, and a kind of valiant force involuntarily diffused throughout the entire battlefield. As for Xiaohua, who bore the brunt of this, he felt that the true essence in his body had already been obstructed, making it difficult for him to circulate it smoothly. Roar! Xiaohua raised his head and roared. The sound of thunder also came from his body. Rumble! Tiny threads of thunder surged out from his body. At the same time, his body suddenly rushed out. It was as if he was stepping on rolling thunder. Imperial Thunder Shock. Imperial Lightning Shock. It was Imperial Thunder Shock. It's not Imperial Lightning Travel. Xianxia was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Previously, he was already shocked by Xiaohua's lightning escape technique, but when he heard the loud sound of Xiaohua's Imperial Lightning Travel technique, he cried out involuntarily, I have finally seen Imperial Lightning Travel in my lifetime. Fellow Taoist Can. Mingyu was rather astonished to see Xianxia lose his composure. She said in a low voice, Is Imperial Thundershock very difficult to cultivate? It's more than difficult. Xianxia blurted out, but after he finished speaking, he regretted it and said in a low voice, This is a secret of my Imperial Thunder Sect. Forgive me for not being able to say it out loud. Nonsense, Master Qian Lazy had only cultivated to the edge of the second layer of the lightning eclipse. He hadn't even stepped into Imperial Thundershock. This golden core senior brother was already at the third stage of the lightning eclipse. Do you think Xianxia could casually reveal this? Wang Hua, Ji Yi had already turned into a shooting star. The earthen yellow brilliance was exceptionally dazzling. The strength of the confinement force surrounding him was fluctuating. As he flew, all of the magic tools and magic treasures within 100 zhong of him, including flying swords, were vibrating. They were all not under the control of cultivators and swordsmen's divine senses. They slightly trembled in midair and emitted frightening cries. At this moment, Mingyu also understood. As an equipment cultivator, it was normal for Ji Yi to be able to use his divine sense to isolate her connection with her magic treasure Mingyu. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure was also blurry. He was like a bolt of lightning. Even the might of wind and thunder surrounding his body was not the least bit inferior to Ji Ye's. Senior brother Nameless, what are you doing? Seeing Xiaohua also clenching his fists and rushing over, Xianxia was dumbstruck. A golden core cultivator was actually competing in physical strength with an equipment cultivator. Wasn't this just stupid? Both of them were using all of their strength. The distance of a few li was closed in an instant. Even Ji Yi was bewildered. He didn't know why Xiaohua still hadn't taken out his magic treasure at this time. His other hidden hand could only fall through in vain. But at this moment, Ji Yi suddenly felt a needle-like feeling in his Naiwen palace. Oh? Ji Yi laughed involuntarily. He clearly understood that this was definitely a divine ability that Xiaohua used with his divine sense. Unfortunately, he was currently an equipment cultivator. He simply didn't fear this kind of secret technique. Indeed, Xiaohua really couldn't think of any method. He flew to the center and used the soul-piercing technique. Who would have thought that Ji Ye's Naiwen palace was like a lump of stubborn stone? His divine sense was instead pierced. Fight! Ji Ye's scarlet-yellow eyes didn't even blink. He clenched his fists and smashed them towards the charging Xiaohua's body. Senior martial brother, Xianxia couldn't help but clench his fists. He clearly understood that if this fist smashed onto the body, not to mention a mid or late gold core cultivator, even a nascent soul cultivator absolutely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Since Xianxia was so anxious, there was no need to mention Fairy Hongxia's worry. She really didn't understand why Xiaohua didn't take out his magic treasure. Could it be that he gave me his magic treasure and didn't have it himself? This kind of lover. Good, today this old man wants to see if your equipment cultivator's body is stronger, or if my Imperial Thundersect's body cultivator is stronger. Xiaohua's arrogant voice rose from afar. It really made everyone's eyes pop out. Xiaohua actually also clenched his fist and smashed it towards Ji Ye's fist. Rumble! It was practically a world-shaking tremor. Waves of air soared into the sky from between the two people. Within several hundred zhong, all the magic tools, magic treasures, and flying swords lost control. They were sent flying by Ji Ye's uncontrollable confinement power and the countless tiny lightning bolts that rose from Xiaohua's body. The swordsmen and cultivators who were fighting turned pale with fright. This kind of power had already surpassed a fight between golden core cultivators. They couldn't help but connect to their magic treasures and immediately flew up again, leaving the several hundred zhong space for the two people who made them feel inconceivable. The cultivators and swordsmen who were fighting might not have seen clearly, but the cultivators and swordsmen who were secretly watching the fight were dumbstruck. They saw the two people colliding with each other with their bare hands. That Ji Ye's face was expressionless as he stood majestically. Even his blue robe didn't move in the slightest. But what about Xiaohua? As if he was struck by a heavy blow, he was thrown into the air. However, Xiaohua, who was accompanied by this flash of lightning, flew up 5 zhong and immediately laughed wildly. A string of afterimages flashed and rushed towards Ji Yi again. No matter if it was a cultivator or a swordsman, they were all very clear that Ji Yi was a high-level equipment cultivator of the illusory sword. It was a magic treasure. How could a cultivator compare? Not only did Xiao Hua receive Ji Ye's all-out attack, he even counterattacked vigorously after being repelled. This cultivator. Good heavens, could he still be called a cultivator? The following battle situation was even more puzzling to the crowd. They saw Xiao Hua brandish his fist towards Ji Yi, and a rare trace of astonishment flashed through Ji Ye's eyes. He also brandished his fist to block. The two people actually fought in the air with their fists and feet. Although Ji Ye's fists and feet contained a strong confining power, and Xiao Hua's fists and feet flashed with lightning, and when their fists and feet hit a hard rock, the rock would certainly be turned into powder. However, each of their moves was clear, completely similar to the martial arts of the secular world. Among the several tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen, there were definitely people who had seen fists and feet. When they saw that the two seniors were actually martial artists, they became even more puzzled. After all, martial arts were the work of the secular world's people. After fighting for no less than half a cup of tea's time, the two people were actually evenly matched. Xiao Hua's Big Dipper God fist and ethereal steps were not inferior to Ji Ye's fists and feet in the slightest. Especially Xiao Hua's physical body, even if it was inferior to Ji Ye's, the difference was limited. Moreover, within the space of several tens of zhang around the two people, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was incomparably chaotic. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was stirred up by the two people's every move was actually greater than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth when two magic treasures were fighting. Xiao Hua, a golden core disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, had really overturned the limits of cultivators today. Looking at Ji Yi again, his originally almost emotionless red and yellow eyes now had a bit of fanaticism. It seemed that he hadn't been this happy for a very, very long time, and hadn't fought with such a wild style. "Eat my fists!" Ji Yi shouted loudly. He clenched his fist, and a power that could shatter a huge rock with a single punch, accompanied by an extremely valiant confining power, rushed towards Xiao Hua. "Ha ha ha, how could this old man be afraid of you?" Xiao Hua clasped his hands together, and lightning lingered on his fists. The lightning tore apart the confining power and rushed towards Ji Ye's fist. With a loud bang, the two fists collided. The air condensed, and then a wave of air gushed out. As the wave of air rolled, fine traces that were hard to see with the naked eye actually flashed in the air. However, these fine traces were too small, and as soon as they appeared, they immediately healed. This impact was still a bit too strong, and Xiao Hua couldn't be as steady as Ji Yi. His body twisted and turned, cleverly dispersing the force, and even using this force to counterattack Ji Yi. This was also what Ji Yi couldn't understand after much thought. Nameless, Ji Yi blinked his eyes and said, "This old man didn't expect that a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder Sect like you would also be proficient in the martial arts." "Likewise, likewise," Xiao Hua casually replied. However, the martial arts of today's martial arts are already nothing in this old man's hands. Ji Yi continued, "It's rare for this old man to meet an opponent like you. If I don't use my best skills, then this old man has underestimated you. I'll also let you down." Xiao Hua still disagreed. However, if this old man uses his life cultivation method, even this old man won't be able to control it. Xiao Hua's brows furrowed slightly. Hearing Ji Ye's words, he was actually treating him as a hypocritical opponent. "Do as you wish." Xiao Hua looked up and down at Ji Yi and said, "Right now, you and I are enemies. If you don't use your divine ability, this old man will take your life." "Good. Ha, well said. Since you and I are enemies, this old man won't say anything." Ji Ye's eyes flashed with brilliance and he laughed loudly. "To be able to fight an opponent like you, this old man will have no regrets even if I die." Chapter 2509. As he spoke, the earthen yellow light around Ji Ye's body suddenly shone brightly. A powerful suction force appeared from his body, strong tornadoes were created, and all the heaven and earth spiritual energy within several hundred meters of him was drawn towards him. Xiao Hua stood steadily within the tornadoes, purple lightning coiled around his body. He looked at Ji Ye's transformation without fear. The light became brighter, piercing Xiao Hua's eyes to the point of squinting. However, he could still clearly see that the light was gradually expanding. Runes appeared on Ji Ye's forehead, face, and bare arms. Those runes flowed within the light, as if there were countless tadpoles swimming within Ji Ye's skin. Bzzz bzzz bzzz. Xiaohua was familiar with the sound of vibrations coming from Ji Ye's body. Along with the vibrations, Ji Ye's head, shoulders, and arms gradually disappeared. They gradually turned into a solid earthen yellow color. When the surging heaven and earth spiritual energy gradually calmed down, a 3-meter-long ancient bronze seal appeared in the air. Above the seal, there were many jade talismans hanging from it, and a lifelike dragon head was resting on top of the seal. The dragon's body coiled around the seal, and the runes that had been flowing on Ji Ye's skin appeared with the sound of the dragon's body. An enormous power of a magic treasure flowed out from the runes, and under the dragon's body, there was actually a wave of runes. Overturning Sea Seal. Even though Xiaohua had never seen the overturning sea seal before, he could not help but shout at this moment. Wasn't this the overturning sea seal that Feng Yuan spoke of? It turned out that this overturning sea seal was indeed from Chongbai sect, but it did not end up in the hands of ordinary Dao cultivators. It ended up in Huan country, and even more so in the hands of a weapon cultivator. No wonder Ji Yi could suppress the innate true water. Xiaohua had a flash of understanding. It was as if someone was controlling the ocean overturning seal. The ocean overturning seal slowly rose up, and a sealing force that was several times stronger than before suddenly appeared. The space within 1,000 feet was filled with this sealing force, and even the air couldn't flow. Oh my, this is a true magic treasure. Xiaohua sighed inwardly, his hands swiping in the air. Amidst the dense dark clouds in the sky, a huge bolt of lightning struck down along with Xiaohua's lightning-attracting art. It struck the ocean-overturning seal, the seal of the ocean-overturning seal. Terrifying Phoenix. Previously, Guyu had never seen Xiaohua use the lightning-attracting technique, so she was unable to distinguish it. At this time, seeing this hand seal, her complexion changed greatly. It's just that Xiaohua's previous cultivation and previous appearance were very different from the current one. Although Gu Yu's heart was greatly shocked, she still couldn't be sure. Actually, there was no lack of sword cultivators who had such thoughts, because the name of the terrifying phoenix was just too famous. Just like Qin Jian's reputation among cultivators. Of course, all sword cultivators knew that the phoenix dharma body, lightning attraction technique, and foundation establishment cultivation were the marks of the terrifying phoenix. At this time, Xiaohua only had the lightning attraction technique, so they could only think of Xiaohua as the terrifying phoenix's teacher. Roar! The ocean-overturning seal emitted an earthen yellow brilliance that was almost 10 feet long. It rushed straight into the sky, blocking in front of the heavenly lightning. Even if the heavenly lightning completely scattered this brilliance, when it landed on the ocean-overturning seal, the damage was minimal. Ha ha ha, sure enough, it's delightful. Xiaohua laughed heartily. His hands rubbed together again, and streaks of lightning poured down like a waterfall. See, not to mention Ming Yu and Rua Si, even Qin Shang was also dumbstruck. Although he came from the Imperial Thunder Sect's Canlei Palace, when had he ever seen such heavenly lightning? When had he ever seen heavenly lightning falling like rain? That surging heavenly lightning, the powerful force, the flash that seemed to be able to scatter all living things, it really made people tremble with fear. The three of them had no doubt that if they were under the heavenly lightning, even if they could use magic treasures and flying swords to block it for a moment, they would still be smashed into pieces by the heavenly lightning. However, this was only their feeling. The ocean-overturning seal was different. They saw the ocean-overturning seal radiate brilliance in all directions. The dragon head that was entrenched on the seal slightly raised, and streaks of ripple-like illusory images rushed into the sky one after another, blocking the heavenly lightning 10 feet away. The most inconceivable thing was that the ocean-overturning seal suddenly flew up, and an illusory image flew out, bringing all the ripple-like illusory images with it. The real body instantly rushed in front of Xiaohua, and crashed into him. Seeing that the true essence in his body was imprisoned by the ocean-overturning seal, and it was very difficult for it to flow, Xiaohua's arms shook, and with a wave of his hand, he took out 2 huge devil hammers. These devil hammers were obviously smaller than the 2 devil hammers he got from the Thunder Sect, but now, it was already good to have something useful. Cha-cha-cha, lightning flashed around Xiaohua's body. At the same time, he did his best to resist the imprisonment power, and at the same time, the 2 hammers fiercely smashed out. Boom! With a loud sound, Xiaohua's body flipped over like a bullet. The power of the 2 hammers could not compare to the ocean-overturning seal, and Xiaohua was sent flying back. The ocean-overturning seal did not stop, and once again flew out, following Xiao Hua. It was much more agile than Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal. Boom! Seeing the ocean-overturning seal coming over, Xiao Hua stabilized his body, and at the same time, waved the two hammers again, and continuously hit the ocean-overturning seal. Alas, rather than saying that he hit the ocean-overturning seal, it was better to say that he was sent flying by the imprisonment power of the ocean-overturning seal. Although the devil hammers were powerful, Xiao Hua was not a devil realm devil after all. He could only borrow the weight of the devil tool, and could not use the devil tool. Every time he hit the ocean-overturning seal, 50 to 60% of the power was blocked by the brilliance of the ocean-overturning seal. The power that could truly damage the ocean-overturning seal was really very little. Nameless. Are you looking down on this old man? Suddenly, a muffled and somewhat cold voice came from Xiao Hua's ears. It was actually Ji Ye's sound transmission. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Looking at the ocean-overturning seal that had stopped attacking and was slightly rotating in midair, he also sent a sound transmission. This old man has already used his full strength. How can you say that this old man is looking down on you? You are a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect. If this old man was in his human form, it would be fine if you used your fists and legs barehanded. But why is it that when this old man transformed into a tool and fought with you, you are still barehanded? If you don't look down on this old man, then what is it? Isn't this old man's devil hammers a devil tool? Xiao Hua laughed. Could it be that your Imperial Thunder sect is so poor that you don't even have a single magic treasure? Ji Ye's voice became increasingly cold. Old man, you are a bit strange. Xiao Hua pointed with his hand and said, if this old man took out a magic treasure, would you still be alive? You don't take the opportunity to kill this old man, and actually want this old man to take out a magic treasure? This Ji would rather fight to the death with you than be tolerated by you. Ji Yi was somewhat angry. Hearing Ji Ye's words, Xiao Hua's heart moved. He thought to himself, this tool cultivator has a rather straightforward temperament. If there wasn't a Dao cultivator battle, I should be able to make friends with him. If you still don't take out your magic treasure, this Ji will ignore you. Ji Yi sneered. There are tens of thousands of Dao sect disciples here, but there isn't anyone who can resist this Ji, right? All right, Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and sent a sound transmission. This old man does have some methods, but it isn't convenient for me to use them in front of everyone. If you want to experience them, we will leave this place. All right. Ji Yi agreed without hesitation. The ocean-overturning seal suddenly flew high into the sky, flying into the distance. You all will continue as before. Ignore I. Xiao Hua coldly said to Kanshang and the others. If anyone dares to chase after me, this old man will take their life. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's body surged with thunder as he chased after the ocean-overturning seal. Continue as before. Kanshang and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Continue the fierce battle as before? Before Xiao Hua and Ji Yi arrived, tens of thousands of people had already died on the two battlefields. The ground was littered with broken limbs and blood. When the two experts appeared, although they were just confronting each other in the beginning, their intimidating aura had already affected the situation of the battle. Everyone's attacks were already somewhat sluggish. Of course, there were thousands of people who died in the process. When the two experts fought beautifully, how could the tens of thousands of people still have the mood to fight? Although they didn't clearly separate from each other, they only focused on protecting themselves and focused on the fight between the experts. At this moment, the two experts left and went to play on their own. Leaving the tens of thousands of people as before, who would still have the mood to fight? Whether it was sword cultivators or Dao cultivators, their morale was completely gone. Forget it! Mingyu activated her magic treasure, Mingyu, and said to Ruasi, you and I will withdraw our disciples and wait for the outcome of the two seniors. If senior brother of the Imperial Thunder sect wins, all of you will withdraw from the Seven Extremes Ridge. Alright, if senior brother Ji Yi wins, all of you will also withdraw from the Sky Patrol City. Ruasi gritted her teeth and replied. After saying that, Mingyu glanced at Kanshang. The three of them sent out their communication talismans at the same time. Following a sharp whistling sound, all the Dao cultivators and sword cultivators flew slowly and separated in an orderly manner. Don't touch the corpses of both sides' disciples for the time being. Wait until the outcome of the battle is determined. Kan Shang shouted again. All right. Ruoxi understood that this order was obviously beneficial to her. Without hesitation, she passed down the order. Fairy Xianxia returned to her team. Gu Yu also flew to the left side of the beginning of spring. Everyone was eagerly waiting, looking at the direction where Xiao Hua and Ji Yi disappeared. As for Xiao Hua, while chasing Ji Yi, he released his Buddhist awareness. When he saw that both sides had stopped fighting, it was exactly as he expected. Only then did he change his direction and urged Imperial Thunder Travel to rush forward. After flying straight for more than 100 miles, it was an extremely flat land. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the rainbow in the sky was exceptionally dazzling. Buzz. The strong roar stopped in midair. The seal of Overturn the Sea stirred up the suction force again. Hurricanes swept up the snow and rushed into the air, raising the snow and dust within 100 feet of the surrounding. Can you show your true strength now? Ji Ye's voice came. Of course, Xiao Hua's Buddhist awareness swept through the nearby 100 miles. There was no trace of people at all. Feeling relieved, he clapped his hands and took out the wishful staff. Is it still a demonic tool? Ji Yi was somewhat dissatisfied. Don't worry. Xiao Hua sneered. This young master has a lot of methods. You will be satisfied. Chapter 25:10. Good. Then this old man will have no regrets even if he dies. Ji Yi said. Ha! What does that mean? Xiao Hua felt a little strange. Isn't this too discouraging? Moreover, the same words were said twice. Buzz! The seal of Turning the Sea roared again, and the power of imprisonment that filled the space with a huge force smashed towards Xiao Hua. Come, come, come! Xiao Hua held the staff in his hand and his heart was set. The lightning around his body flashed out, and now it reached a few feet. He was really like a god. Boo! The staff waved, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was disturbed by the seal of Turning the Sea became even more chaotic. After the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea was scattered by the lightning, the staff effortlessly annihilated the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea again. Countless cracks appeared and disappeared in the space, setting off a wave of air that soared to the sky. This time, Xiao Hua's figure was sent flying again, but he was in a much better condition. The heavenly staff technique had already eliminated this bit of weakness. As a result, the wishful steel staff and the seal of Turning the Sea clashed for hundreds of rounds. As the seal of Turning the Sea flew, and as Xiao Hua flashed and moved, they really fought from the ground to the sky, and then from the sky to the ground. The seal of Turning the Sea was so hard, and the power of imprisonment and the weight of the seal of Turning the Sea was so great. It was different from the last time when Xiao Hua fought with Feng Buping. Xiao Hua was actually a little numb at this time. Grandma, this guy is a magic weapon after all. This young master really can't compete with him at this time. Xiao Hua shook his sore thumb and secretly thought. Forget it. Xiao Hua shook his hand and the staff returned to the space. This young master doesn't need to use his weakness to overcome the enemy's strength. This young master has a way. While speaking, Xiao Hua took out the sword pouch. Go! As Xiao Hua pinched the sword, the 7 flying swords rushed out and surrounded the seal of Turning the Sea. The power of the 7 stars array suppressed the seal of Turning the Sea. You are not nameless. You are the terrifying phoenix. Ji Ye's voice came out, full of horror. Not bad. Xiao Hua's body faintly circulated with magic power. His body gradually expanded and his appearance returned to its original state. This young master is the terrifying phoenix. Good. That's why I've never heard of such a powerful cultivator from the Imperial Thunder Sect. Although Ji Yi applauded, his voice was still cold. However, this Ji still doesn't know your name. Xiao Hua slightly narrowed his eyes, hesitated for a moment, and said in a low voice. All right, this Ji understands. Even if I have to sacrifice my body, I will have no regrets in this battle. As Ji Yi spoke, the light around his body became even brighter, and the faint roar of a dragon could be heard from his head. Seal! Seeing this, Xiao Hua hurriedly activated the 7-star sword formation. The 7 illusory swords caught the formation and surged towards the overturning sea seal. Wang Wang Wa. The seal of turning the sea slowly rotated, resisting the power of the formation with difficulty. Damn it! Although the flying swords of the illusory swordsmen are powerful, they are not controlled by 7 illusory swordsmen. But this young master is controlling them through the sword pouch, so their power is too weak. Thinking back to that day, they were able to seal this young master, but when they were trying to seal that bastardly Xianxia, they were actually shattered by his nascent soul hand. And now, they can't even fight against the seal of turning the sea. Io, the hand of a nascent soul. That's right, this young master also has a refined talisman, right? Although it is not the hand of a nascent soul, if this young master uses it, it might not be inferior to a nascent soul hand. Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly remembered the half-talisman he obtained when he killed Qianyuhua in the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. He had never used that thing before, but now he could take it out and use it. While thinking, Xiaohua controlled the 7 stars great formation. He took out the damaged talisman and temporarily placed it in his bosom. Sure enough, it was as Xiaohua thought. Although the 7 stars great formation was powerful, it was beyond his ability to control it through the sword pouch. In particular, the seal of turning the sea that Ji Yi had transformed into was extremely heavy, and its power was also extremely great. Every time it moved within the formation, it would be able to restrain the 7 flying swords and slightly disrupt the formation. This did not mean that the current Ji Yi was much stronger than the Xiaohua of that day. It was just that Ji Ye's seal of turning the sea was a magic treasure, and its quality was much better than the 7 flying swords. Resisting the flying swords was Ji Ye's specialty. Xiaohua frowned slightly. He tried his best to control the sword pouch, directing the 7 flying swords to continuously perfect the 7 stars great formation, making it even smoother than before. However, all of a sudden, a cold divine sense penetrated the 7 stars great formation and covered the sword pouch. Immediately, Xiaohua felt that the connection between him and the sword pouch had a resistance, and as the divine sense increased, the resistance became even greater. It was as if a flowing river was mixed with mud and sand, and this mud and sand was gradually accumulating, like a dam. I understand now. Xiaohua suddenly realized, Ji Yi transformed into a magic treasure, so he has an additional ability. He can actually affect other magic treasures through magic treasures. He doesn't even need to transform into a magic treasure to affect the connection between others and his own magic treasure. This guy didn't make a move just now because he wanted to let this young master take out my magic treasure, so that he could win by surprise. Ha ha ha, fortunately, this young master also had a taboo at that time, and did not dare to take out any magic treasure. If you use this move now, how will it be effective? Thinking, Xiaohua's figure swayed, and he waved his hand as if he was forming a seal. The clear water bottle was already in the Buddha's relic's hand. Release. The Buddha's relic moved slightly, and the innate true water rushed out, instantly turning into a vast ocean that surrounded the seal of turning the sea and the 7 stars great formation. And you also have innate true water? Ji Ye's shocked voice came from the seal of turning the sea. In this innate true water, he did not dare to release his divine sense too far, so he quickly withdrew it. Hee, seal of turning the sea. This young master wants to see how you can turn the sea. Saying this, Xiaohua laughed, and the Buddha's relic urged the innate true water to surge towards the seal of turning the sea. The seal of overturning the sea was indeed powerful. Wherever the brilliance went, the torrential true water would be suppressed, appearing calm and tranquil. However, in this 7 stars great array, the brilliance of the seal of overturning the sea was restricted and suppressed very severely. It could not suppress the true water for too long. However, Xiaohua's true water was really endless. Each wave was higher than the previous one. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the scattered light of the seal of overturning the sea was corroded by half. In particular, the seal of turning the sea was suppressed by the 7 stars great formation, and the distance it could fly was limited. It could not attack Xiaohua, and could only be suppressed by the innate true water, without any power to fight back. Needless to say, everyone knew that if the seal of turning the sea did not have any special methods, it would be defeated sooner or later. Sigh, it seemed to be an old sigh, and Ji Ye's voice was filled with endless emotion, as expected of the terrifying phoenix. Do you still have a lot of methods? Your Dharma body. This old man also hopes to see it. Hee, old man, as long as you can force this Xiao to that extent, this Xiao will definitely fulfill your wish. Xiaohua also had some respect for this tool cultivator. Hearing Xiaohua actually call him old man, Ji sighed again and said, "This old man has been in this world for nearly 1,000 years. What?" Xiaohua was shocked and said anxiously, "Old man, what did you say? You are 1,000 years old?" "Yes, this old man is about 930 years old." Ji was also surprised. "What's so strange about this? Although little friend Xiao looks like a teenager, I'm afraid you are at least 600 years old, right?" "Hee, little friend Xiao, do you think this old man is too old? With your 600 years old cultivation, you can fight this old man to a draw, you can be proud." This. Xiaohua was embarrassed. He understood in his heart that the cultivation he displayed was at the late stage of gold core. If it was the cultivation speed of an ordinary cultivator, 600 years old would be considered normal. Sigh, I can't let little friend Xiao be proud. This old man is slow-witted. On one side, Ji was resisting the innate true water and the 7 stars great array. On the other hand, he was actually speaking frankly with Xiaohua, and even called him little friend. This really made Xiaohua somewhat puzzled. "You also know this old man's background is similar to yours. I entered the Tao through martial arts, but this old man's aptitude is not good. I couldn't practice the Tao, so I could only escape to the sword domain, and was accepted as a disciple by the Bronze Bell sect. Actually, in this old man's heart, I'm afraid I'm the same as you. I don't put any tool cultivators in my eyes. I even think it's an unorthodox technique." "No," Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said. "This Xiao has never thought about it. There are 3,000 Daos in the world. Who knows which one is the straight path? Tool cultivators, bird cultivators, sword cultivators, and Tao cultivators. Each have their own Daos." While speaking, Xiaohua's control of the innate true water also slackened a lot, but he was still careful, afraid that Ji would do something strange. "Little friend Xiao has such thoughts. You're really magnanimous. In the future you'll definitely become a great person." Ji praised. "I don't dare. Although this old man has entered the door of tool cultivators, my progress is still slow. I've failed to fuse with magic tools." Ji said again, "Just when this old man's heart was disheartened, I met a soul cultivator training in the sword domain. This soul cultivator's cultivation was profound, and like little friend Xiao, she was magnanimous. She didn't look down on this old man because I'm a tool cultivator. This old man is ashamed. Seeing her that day was like seeing a celestial being. In order to accompany her to a secret place, I disregarded the sect's rules." Hee, old man, who hasn't been young before? Even if you make a mistake, the heavens will forgive you." Xiaohua said with a smile. The Buddhist seal controlling the innate true water decreased by a bit. Yes, thinking about those 3 days, it was only 3 days. It made this old man think back 1,000 years. Ji also said with a smile. This old man clearly remembers that her name was Ziyan. An elegant, gentle name, just like the purple jasmine flower in the sword tomb, with an earth-shattering splendor, but restrained divine splendor, not arrogant at all. Ziyan? Ziyi? Xiaohua was stunned. Why are they both so named Zi? Could it be that Ziyi is a soul cultivator? However, before Xiaohua could think more, Ji said again, "Unfortunately, it's already been 1,000 years. I don't know if she's still alive in this world." Chapter 25:11. Old Master Ji. Xiaohua said with a smile, "I don't know much about soul cultivation techniques, but if the cultivators of my Tao sect can cultivate to the nascent soul stage, their lifespan can reach 2,000 years. Besides, you've lived for nearly 1,000 years. How can he not have a reason?" "That's true, but how many people actually have such an opportunity?" Ji Ye's voice rang out from within the seal of the ocean. "The reason why I was able to live for so long was because of this seal of the ocean. My primordial spirit gradually fused with the seal of the ocean, and my body fused with it. Naturally, my lifespan was extended. If I had cultivated a Taoist art, I probably would have been reduced to a pile of bones long ago." Sigh, speaking of the sea overturning seal, it was also Ziyan's fortuitous encounter. In front of the secret plane, Ziyan encountered a Tai bisect cultivator. The two of them fought, and the Tai bisect cultivator was the one with the sea overturning seal. However, Ziyan was slightly inferior to that cultivator and had almost died in that cultivator's hands. When this old man saw this, my blood boiled, and I didn't care about anything else. I rushed forward and used my body to shield Xian. I only wanted to die for her. Good. Xiaohua couldn't help but cry out, giving a thumbs up and praising. Hee, unfortunately, this old man was wrong. Ji Ye's voice rang out. What was this old man's cultivation at that time? How could he possibly block the sea overturning seal for Ziyan? Everything was just Ziyan's plan to lure the enemy. This old man is just imagining things. Old master, your block is not bad. You finally have an opportunity. Hearing Ji Yi mention the seal of turning the sea, how could Xiaohua not know that there was something fishy about it? He smiled and said. And that is indeed the case. Ji Yi didn't deny it. If it wasn't for this old master blocking that attack and sustaining heavy injuries, I wouldn't have been able to escape. Not only will this seal not fall into this old man's hands, this old man will also not be able to obtain a secret technique of soul cultivation. Xiaohua nodded slightly. In fact, it's a secret technique that fuses the primordial spirit with the magical equipment. Ji Yi didn't hide anything and said, that day, when Ziyan taught me the seal of overturning the sea and the secret technique, she clearly said that my aptitude was too poor and my primordial spirit was too weak. I couldn't cultivate at all, not even as an artifact cultivator. If you force yourself to cultivate, in the end, your primordial spirit will definitely dissipate into the magic treasure, and your body will become the body. Ah! Old man, you are. Xiaohua suddenly understood and hurriedly stopped the activation of the Xiantian true water. After telling Ji Yi about this, Xiaohua's killing intent also decreased a lot. Little friend Xiao is indeed a kind person. Ji Yi smiled and said, however, it's all too late. Earlier, this old man was a bit hesitant. After all, this old man has already fused with the seal of ocean overturning for 1,000 years. The seal of ocean overturning's coldness is constantly attacking this old man's primordial spirit. If this old man were to fight with you, I'm afraid that my primordial spirit would have already reached the end of dissipation. The old man has always said, even if I die, I have no regrets. That's what he means, right? Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. That's right, to be able to fight a magnanimous cultivator like little friend Xiao, it is indeed this old man's wish. Ji Yi continued, this old man fused his body into an artifact to fight against the heavens, to fight against humans, right? If I can't fight, why did I make that choice 1,000 years ago? Since this old man has chosen this path, I will definitely walk it to the end without any hesitation. Yes, this little one understands. Xiaohua was filled with deep veneration towards Ji Yi. This little one will definitely fulfill the old man's wish. I'm afraid that in another hour, this old man's primordial spirit will dissipate. Before this old man died, I had some regrets. After saying so much, I only hope that someone in this world can understand some of this old man's thoughts. Even if I'm an artifact cultivator, a beast cultivator, even if I'm an unorthodox cultivator in the eyes of you Dao cultivators, behind everyone's back is a sad story. Behind everyone's back is the blood and sweat of struggle. All right, Xiaohua slightly bit his lips and replied in a low voice. This little one is actually also a loose cultivator. I also have some feelings towards this. Haha, forget it. This old man has lived for 1,000 years, and every day, I've been fighting against the erosion of this magic weapon. Now is the time to end it. Come, it's useless to say more. Let this old man see your magic power. If you can withstand this old man's final attack, this old man will give you a surprise. As soon as he finished speaking, the seal of Turn the Ocean flashed with an intense brilliance. A rumbling sound that seemed to be able to overturn mountains and seas could be heard. Then, a force that was several times stronger than before was generated, resisting the 7 stars array's confinement force. Rise! Xiaohua did not hesitate and hurriedly used the Buddhist seal, activating the innate true water. On one hand, he corroded and suppressed the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea, and on the other hand, he tried his best to stabilize the 7 stars great array. Seeing that the waves were several times stronger than before, Xiaohua waved his hand, holding the wishful staff in his hand, and entered the 7 stars great array, smashing towards the seal of Turning the Sea. Xiaohua understood that the best way now was to use all his means to fight against the seal of Turning the Sea and send Ji Yi on his way. Boom, boom, boom. Xiaohua waved the wishful staff casually, and every time it touched the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea, it made a roaring sound. Although the seal of turning the sea trembled slightly each time, it always stood tall and strong, like a cornerstone. Tisk, tisk, Xiaohua sighed with emotion. This kind of magic treasure can truly display the power of a magic treasure. It's a pity that I can't try this secret technique. Even if I get this seal of turning the sea, I'm afraid it won't have such power. Just as he was thinking, Xiaohua became alert again. Previously, Ji Yi withdrew his divine sense because he was afraid of being corroded by the innate true water, but now he sent it out again, through the 7 stars great array and the innate true water to cover the sword pouch. He wanted to use the sword pouch to destroy the 7 stars great array. Hee hee. The corners of Xiaohua's mouth curled into a smile as he took out the soul-absorbing bell and the toad. His soul thread swayed, and with a loud dang, the ice-cold divine sense abruptly withdrew as if it was bitten by a venomous snake. Xiaohua seized the opportunity to pursue and strike the bell twice more. Contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, the divine sense retracted, but the brilliance of the seal of turning the sea became even more brilliant. In fact, as the sealing power of the seal of turning the sea increased, the 7 stars great array faintly showed signs of losing control. Roar! Suddenly there was a loud rumble. The innate true water was knocked dozens of meters away by the seal of turning the sea. The entire 7 stars great array also lost control in an instant. The seal of turning the sea gained its freedom and circled in the air for a bit before flying off into the distance. Not good. Seeing that the seal of turning the sea was about to leave and that Ji Ye's voice didn't come, Xiaohua immediately understood. Ji Ye's primordial spirit had most likely disappeared. Although he said there was still some time, it was only because of his powerful attack and the use of the soul armament that it collapsed a step earlier. And that last attack just now should be Ji Ye's final move. Where do you think you're going? Xiaohua flew up and slapped his hand, taking out the giant hand talisman. Under the urging of his magic power, the magic power around Xiaohua's body was instantly sucked into the talisman. Wah! With a loud rumble, a giant hand of several meters in size appeared in the air. And the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 100 meters of the area also swarmed over and fused into the giant hand. You can stay here. Xiaohua formed a hand seal. The giant hand scooped up in the air and a powerful force firmly covered the seal of turning the sea. The seal of turning the sea that originally flew dozens of meters away was like an eagle spreading its wings. Although it let out a buzzing sound, it still couldn't move even half a foot. Immediately, Xiaohua urged the giant hand. That giant hand slowly closed, wanting to grab the seal of turning the sea. Woo! The seal of turning the sea suddenly shrank and rushed towards the giant hand. With a loud rumble, the seal of turning the sea actually smashed into the giant hand. Not good, Xiaohua said to himself. The giant hand talisman was originally damaged. How could it withstand the full power of the seal of turning the sea? However, Xiaohua didn't panic. He urged the innate true water to quickly wrap around the giant hand. The 7 stars great formation also rushed outside the innate true water. With another loud rumble, the seal of turning the sea indeed broke free from the giant hand's control. Following that, the giant hand turned into another talisman and floated down, while the seal of turning the sea itself rushed into the innate true water. Haha, this young master wants to see where you can run. Seeing that the seal of turning the sea that had fallen into the innate true water no longer had its previous radiance, and that the space it opened was getting smaller and smaller, Xiaohua laughed loudly. But then, a kind of sadness emerged in his heart. Ji Yi was like a spring flower in autumn. In order to pursue the peak of cultivation, he burned his life away at the last moment of the battle. He seemed to be untimely, but it also seemed to be a matter of course. Admittedly, he got what he wanted, but Ji Yi wasn't the first to have this kind of pursuit, and he definitely wouldn't be the last. Perhaps there would never be the last. The path of cultivation was long and endless. Who didn't seek it in loneliness? This kind of opponent was worthy of respect and was hard to meet, but at the same time, he could also be kept in his heart. Fall. Xiaohua's heart was filled with sorrow. He waved his hands, and countless thick heavenly lightning fell from the sky and landed on the seal of turning the sea. It was as if only this kind of sacred heavenly lightning could represent Xiaohua's respect for Ji Yi. Sure enough, following the baptism of the heavenly lightning, the seal of turning the sea's radiance became smaller and smaller. Even the fine lines and talismans on it could be seen clearly. Old Master Ji. Xiao Hua stared at the seal of turning the sea and said in a low voice, "Although you are arrogant and think that this kid's cultivation is only at the late gold core stage, you are still wrong. You are only at the second or third stage of the illusory sword realm. With your cultivation, although you can make the seal of turning the sea display its power, and even challenge the limit of the seal of turning the sea in the end, the seal of turning the sea that you have turned into is still not this kid's match. Of course, now that you have turned into a tool, this seal of turning the sea will be this kid's magic treasure in the future. This kid will definitely make this seal of turning the sea proud and truly suppress the 4 seas." Immediately after, Xiao Hua put away the true water. The Buddha's Saraira chanted incantations, wanting to transcend Ji Yi. Who would have thought that Ji Ye's soul wasn't here at all? This seems to be similar to the situation with the 12 flying swords. Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. At the same time that he put away the Buddha's Saraira, he called out Goldie. He let Goldie watch at the side. After waiting for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the radiance on the seal of turning the sea completely disappeared. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to fly into the great array and release his divine sense. He spat a mouthful of essence blood on the seal of turning the sea and began to refine it according to the method of refining the cloud-suppressing seal. Following Xiao Hua's refining, the seal of turning the sea began to flicker. The dragon body that was coiling around the seal also began to move. Chapter 25:12. After the yellow light flickered and flickered several times, a strand of divine sense rushed into Xiao Hua's mind from the seal of turning sea. Oh! Xiao Hua was startled. He was about to activate God guidance, but he sensed that this was a weak remnant thought. He hurriedly wrapped it with his divine sense, and the information inside was projected into Xiao Hua's mind. This is the surprise old Master Ji was talking about? After a while, Xiao Hua frowned, and his expression was indescribable. "Return," Xiao Hua pointed his finger, and the seal of turning sea slowly shrunk, turning into a palm-sized seal and falling into his hand. Looking at this intact magic treasure, Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. This seemed to be the first intact magic treasure he had obtained. Unfortunately, today's movement was too big. Tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators witnessed it. Won't this young master's heroic appearance spread throughout Sky Patrol City in the future? This seal of turning sea can't be used. Xiao Hua thought smugly. Then Xiao Hua suddenly exclaimed, Loss. Old Master Ji, where's your storage pouch? Why didn't I see it?" Ji Yi turned into a tool, and all his things disappeared. Where did his storage pouch go? Could it be that he didn't bring it when he came out? Thinking about it, Xiao Hua really couldn't be sure whether he saw Ji Ye's storage pouch or not. Forget it. Presumably, the old man knew that he didn't have much time left, so he left everything to his disciples and grand-disciples. Xiao Hua put away the seal of turning sea, the sword pouch and 7 flying swords, and jumped into the sky, flying towards the 7 Extremes Ridge. When he arrived at the battlefield, Xiao Hua still turned into Wu Ming, and the cultivators all cheered when they saw Xiao Hua return. And Ruasi looked like a funeral. Can Shang was naturally the first to come up, and he bowed. "Can Shang of Canlei Palace greet Senior Martial Brother Wu Ming? May I know which disciple's master is Senior Martial Brother Wu Ming?" Xiao Hua looked at him and waved his hand. "Don't ask who I am, I'm just passing by. You wouldn't know who my disciple is even if I told you." "Yes, this disciple knows." Can Sheng didn't dare to say more. "Many thanks to Senior Brother Nameless for saving my life." Ming Yu's eyes glowed as she bowed. "When did I save your life?" Xiao Hua blinked his eyes, not understanding. "It seems that I saved my own wife, right?" However, Xiao Hua still waved his hand. No need. This old man is just passing by. You can continue." "Dare I ask, Senior?" Ruasi didn't dare to step forward. She bowed and asked, "Senior Apprentice Brother Ji Yi, this old man has returned. Where do you think Ji Yi went?" Xiao Hua didn't answer. Instead he said, "Although some people have gone, they still live in this world. Just like some people who didn't go, they might not live in this world." Ruasi was confused, but she understood Ji Ye's fate. Thinking about Ji Yi and Yun Bai, she couldn't help but feel sad. "Senior Martial Brother, we've already come to an agreement. Now that Senior Brother has returned, I hope that Senior Brother can make the decision. Should we let the sword cultivators of the Seven Extremes Ridge leave? Xianxia cupped his hands and asked. Let's do as you've already agreed. Xiaohua waved his hand. He knew that if he didn't agree, there would definitely be tens of thousands of lives buried here. Thinking about Ji Yi, perhaps not every sword cultivator was so warlike, murderous, and ferocious. Many thanks, Senior. Ruixi's heart sank. Then she hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Forget it. You kill me, I kill you. When will it end? Xiaohua waved his hand and flew into the sky. He flicked his sleeves and said, All right. Just pretend I didn't say anything. You can continue. Senior, suddenly, Guyu jumped out from beside Li Chun and shouted. Oh! Xiaohua was startled. From now on, Junior will withdraw from the war and won't stain anyone's blood. Guyu shouted. It can't be. If someone wants to kill you, you won't fight back? Xiaohua naturally recognized Guyu. Seeing that she was talking to him so seriously, he couldn't help but laugh. Of course Junior can't not fight back. Guyu's face was somewhat red. All right, you can do whatever you want. Just pretend this old man didn't come here. Xiaohua said, his gaze sweeping over everyone's faces. When he saw the faintly discernible laughter in Fairy Hongxia's eyes, he was startled. Damn it. Like I said, I can't hide it from my wife. I had better hurry up and leave. After being disturbed by Guyu, this girl, I really can't explain it clearly. Senior brother, where are you going? Xianxia hurriedly shouted. Nonsense. Naturally I'm going to the place I want to go. Xiaohua didn't answer at all. He only muttered in his stomach. Lightning flashed around his body again, and he rushed out with lightning. Seeing this senior brother of his with incomparable magical power leave with lightning majestically, Xianxia still scratched his head. Which senior brother of Heavenly Thunder Palace is this? How come I don't have any impression of him? Fairy Hongxia was actually like Xiaohua thought. She looked up and down at Guyu who was standing in the sky far away, somewhat pensive. Xiaohua came. The battle situation of Seven Extremes Ridge changed. Xiaohua left. The victory of Seven Extremes Ridge was also set. Imperial Thunder Sect and Huanhua Sect originally came to spy on the strength of the sword cultivators in Seven Extremes Ridge. They didn't expect to take down Seven Extremes Ridge in one fell swoop. It was imaginable that they were wild with joy. However, it wasn't known whether this battle had the same purpose as the meeting in Sky Patrol City. Of course, this was not something Xiaohua could know. This guy was now flying in the direction of Flowing Ice Valley. At the same time, he took out his severely damaged cloud-suppressing seal and thought about how to integrate the seal of turning the sea into the cloud-suppressing seal. If he didn't make use of such a powerful magic weapon, wouldn't it be too wasteful? However, if he hid this thing in the cloud-suppressing seal, although the idea was a novel one, this novel idea was too small. He couldn't figure it out. Forget it, forget it. Xiaohua was somewhat annoyed. Just treat it as a wasted trip today. Sigh, and this thunder-controlling seal, can't you lower your voice a little? Why is your voice so loud? People can hear it from afar. How could Xianxia of Imperial Thunder Palace not tell that it was thunder-controlling seal? I don't know how he would report it to Qian Mo. Damn it! That black and ugly sword cultivator didn't die in vain. If she didn't sneak attack my wife, how could this young master use thunder-controlling seal? Humph! Luckily she was corroded to death by the innate true water. If she didn't die, this young master will let her taste the feeling of being struck by lightning. In short, Xiaohua's heart was depressed. Although he saved Fairy Hongxia, there was a possibility that he would be exposed. Thunder-controlling seal, that was a lightning escape technique that even Chen Lei couldn't cultivate. How could a golden core disciple cultivate it? If Chen Lei found out, no. Even if Qian Mo found out, he would definitely search the entire Sky Patrol City for him. In this world, there was no wall that didn't have a crack. Once someone found out, even if the secret of the space wouldn't be discovered, what about the cultivation of the Buddhist sect? It was really hard to say. Also, how did that little girl Guyu recognize this young master? Xiaohua was puzzled again. Could it be that this young master is the only one in the thunder-controlling sect who can control the heavenly lightning? Humph! This young master's phoenix celestial body is already gone. Even if you beat me to death, this young master will not admit it. But, if a cultivator wants to know the truth, do they need to beat you to death? Thinking of this, Xiaohua almost cried. This is really a loss. Senior Ji Yi, where is your storage pouch? Why didn't you reveal it in my spirit sense? Li Zongbao is still the most loyal. Xiaohua unconsciously made a decision. From now on, this young master will definitely not enter Sky Patrol City. This young master wants to see which nascent soul cultivator dares to find trouble with this young master. Flowing Ice Valley and Seven Extremes Ridge were not in the same direction. Even if Xiaohua used Thunder Controlling Seal, the rolling thunder resounded through the sky, but it still took him more than 10 days to reach the vicinity. In these 10 days, Xiaohua did not do anything else. He was in a dilemma. He felt that the deeper he went into the war, the greater the possibility of him being exposed. It felt like he was in a quagmire. Flowing Ice Valley was an area of 1,000 miles, much larger than Seven Extremes Ridge. In this area, there was a surging river. The source was naturally a few extremely tall snow mountains in the Huan Kingdom. First, the snow on the snow mountains melted slightly under the sun. These few drops slowly flowed, turning into a dozen drops. Gradually, these dozen drops gathered again, turning into hundreds of drops, thousands of drops, and finally into a trickle. These trickles flowed down from different snow mountains, and under the uncanny workmanship of the heavenly way, they gathered together again, turning into a small stream. The small stream flowed out from the snow region of the Huan Kingdom, gradually reaching the border between the Huan Kingdom and the Shi Kingdom. During this period, other streams converged, and finally formed a river that was dozens of feet long. This river meandered through the rugged valley. Ice fragments flowed down from the valley and the cold in the valley. Large amounts of ice flowed in the river, and thus, Flowing Ice Valley became famous. The river in Flowing Ice Valley still flowed into Shi and even into Lian. As for whether it flowed into Guihe Sea or not, Xiaohua did not know. However, when he saw the turbulent river in the valley, he could not help but sigh at the magnificence of the heavenly Tao. The snowy plateau is extremely cold. All the flowing water has turned into ice. Even if it can flow, it is still under the ice. Here the mountain range is at least 1,000 miles. The cold wind cannot directly blow in. Because the temperature in Flowing Ice Valley is higher, the river does not need to be completely frozen. This is why it can become a river of ice. If I did not see it with my own eyes, how could I believe that this extremely cold plateau has such a wondrous scene? Seeing the turbulent river in Flowing Ice Valley, almost comparable to the cold river of Tianmen Mountain, Xiaohua could not help but sigh with emotion. Immediately after, Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense and scanned the area within 100 miles. He did not see any trace of Li Zongbao's group, so he used the bright thunder escape to fly towards the depths of Flowing Ice Valley. He also took out his token to constantly check the situation inside. After flying for another hour, he saw that he had reached the depths of Flowing Ice Valley. The temperature was a bit warmer, and the ice in the river had decreased. Moreover, the river path was even more steep. The river water rumbled, but there was still no trace of Li Zongbao's group. Chapter 25:13. Strange. Could it be that the fight is already over? Xiaohua pinched his chin as he pondered. At this moment, a corpse suddenly emerged from the flowing ice in the rushing river. Soon after, it sank to the bottom of the river. The traces of blood left on the river surface gradually dissipated. Seeing this, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. Since there are corpses following the river, there must be a fight in the upper reaches of the river. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hastily released his Buddhist sense and flew in the direction of the river. However, he only flew for a moment before giving up. This river was winding and rugged, and it actually circled around the mountain ridge. He couldn't fly around the mountain ridge, right? Rushing high into the sky, Xiaohua hastily flew in the direction of the extreme north. Sure enough, in the time it took to eat a meal, on the distant mountain ridge, he saw a dozen or so swordsmen surrounding several middle-stage Foundation Establishment Cool Breeze Valley cultivators and attacking them. The Cool Breeze Valley cultivators were already unable to hold on. They were already showing signs of defeat and could only barely hold on under the sword light. There weren't any other cultivators nearby. In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they would definitely die in the hands of the sword cultivators. "Don't hurt my Dao sect cultivators," Xianxia shouted loudly. With a wave of his hand, he took out his devil hammer and rushed towards the mountain ridge. Ha ha ha, sure enough, someone is courting death. A bald swordsman looked up and laughed loudly. Just now, I was saying that these cultivators weren't important enough. Now, another middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator is sent over. As he spoke, the swordsman pointed his finger. A greenwood sword flew out from the fierce battle and stabbed towards Xiaohua's direction. How dare you? At this moment, how could Xiaohua put this swordsman in his eyes? Seeing the greenwood-like flying sword rushing towards him, without waiting for the sword light to change, he covered it with his Taoist robe and immediately took the greenwood sword in his hand. He completely cut off the connection between the flying sword and the sword cultivator and casually threw it into the space. Ah! The swordsman's eyes widened in shock. He was somewhat unable to react. This didn't conform to the way of the sword. How could a Foundation establishment cultivator take away the flying sword of the swordsman with his bare hands? While he was still in shock, Xiaohua suddenly sped up. He used the same old method, swinging the demonic hammer in his hand and smashing it down on the sword cultivator's forehead. The sword cultivator was shocked. The demonic hammer was coming at him with a suffocating aura. The sharp sound of the wind was extremely ear-piercing. Without hesitation, he spat out his intrinsic dagger. He wanted to block the demonic hammer, but he quickly retreated. It was exactly the same as when Xiaohua killed a sword cultivator in the past. With a dang sound, the flying sword was cleverly smashed by Xiaohua on the sword's spine, and was shot down. As deep cracks appeared on the surface of the sword, the swordsman's primordial spirit was severely injured and he was extremely dispirited. Following that, there was another pu sound as the demonic hammer smashed into the sword cultivator's forehead without exception. Following that, the sword cultivator's corpse fell into the river. Strangely, the corpse didn't float, but sank directly into the river. Hiss! Xiaohua smoothly killed the swordsman like flowing ice in the river. The swordsmen who were watching the show as usual felt their hearts tremble. At the same time, Xiaohua clapped his hand again and took out the soul-sucking bell and the toad. With a loud dang sound, among the dozen or so sword cultivators, 4 of them immediately lost consciousness. The other 10 or so swordsmen swayed slightly and frowned. They weren't affected by the soul-sucking bell. Be careful. This cultivator actually has a soul tool. One of the swordsmen, who looked old, hastily shouted. Don't worry. We've been fighting soul cultivators in Shuiyu Mountain for so many years. How could we not know? Another 6th-rank swordsman shouted. He pointed his finger, and an azure sword light rushed out and stabbed at Xiaohua. Similarly, another 2 6th-rank swordsmen urged on their flying swords and stabbed at Xiaohua at the same time. Oh? These swordsmen aren't affected by the soul-sucking bell? Xiaohua was slightly surprised, but when he heard the swordsman's words, he instantly understood. These 5th and 6th-rank swordsmen must have fought soul cultivators before. They were similar to the swordsmen Xiaohua had met before. Either they had a secret technique, or they had a soul tool to protect them. As the war continues, the sword cultivators we meet are becoming more and more powerful. Xiaohua was silent. He put the soul-sucking bell into his space, and with a wave of his hand, the universe in the sleeve technique came out one after another. The swift and fierce flying swords of the 3 swordsmen were immediately trapped by a strong sealing force. Before they could urge on their sword energy, Xiaohua put their flying swords into his storage bag. Hurry! Hurry up and leave. This cultivator's secret technique is powerful. The old swordsman who had warned Xiaohua just now had been paying attention to this place. Seeing Xiaohua easily put away the flying swords of the 3 swordsmen, he was already alarmed. Without the slightest hesitation, he shouted loudly. Completely ignoring the several Cool Breeze Valley cultivators, he stepped on his flying sword and rushed over, bringing 2 of the swordsmen with him into the blue sky. The remaining 10 or so swordsmen really did follow orders. Even though one of the swordsmen's flying sword had already pierced the chest of a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator, he still put away his flying sword and flew in the direction of the old swordsman in a group of 3. The 3 of them didn't fly very fast, and each group maintained a certain distance from each other. In fact, The last group even waited for the swordsman whose flying sword Xianxia put away in midair. Tisk. If Xianxia had chased after them, he would naturally have been able to easily kill them all. However, looking at these swordsmen who were merely 6th-stage swordsmen, Xianxia stood with his hands clasped behind his back and inwardly nodded. Not bad, they really do have a fighting style. Cultivators like us can't compare to them. Seeing that Xianxia actually didn't chase after them, not only were the anxious swordsmen puzzled, even the Cool Breeze Valley disciples who flew over to express their thanks were also puzzled. After greeting and expressing their thanks, a slightly older Cool Breeze Valley disciple smiled apologetically and said, "Junior Martial Brother Xiao, these sword cultivators have killed many of my Cool Breeze Valley's disciples. We hate ourselves for not having the ability to kill enemies." Senior Martial Brother Liu. Xianxia hastily waved his hand and said, "It's not that little brother doesn't want to kill them. You also saw that little brother only relied on a secret technique, but this thing consumes a lot of transcendence energy, and it's only pleasing to the eye but useless. If they see a flaw, little brother's life won't be guaranteed. In addition, little brother still has to look for Senior Martial Brother Li Zongbao, so I can't waste any more time. Right, where is the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley? Which fellow Taoist is willing to take little brother there?" Well, hearing that Xianxia wanted someone to take him to the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley, these disciples shrunk their necks one by one and no longer made a sound. It seems that these Cool Breeze Valley disciples escaped from the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley, right? Xianxia muttered to himself. Thinking about how the sword cultivators retreated in an orderly manner just now, he was slightly anxious in his heart. The difference was really too big. If it weren't for his powerful transcendence energy, he definitely wouldn't dare to go there. Fellow Taoists, you only need to tell little brother the direction and location. Xianxia hastily changed his words again. There's a problem with the communication token between little brother and Senior Martial Brother Li Zongbao. All right, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, no, the old disciple hastily smiled apologetically again. It's not that we can't go. Don't say any more. Xianxia hastily waved his hand. Little brother understands in his heart that there's a choice between life and death. This is my nature. Senior Martial Brother knows. Just tell me the location. You can either wait again or go straight to the Sky Patrol City. Little brother hasn't seen anyone today. Yes, I understand. The disciple's face was obviously relieved. He hastily told Xianxia the location, and Xianxia didn't say anything else. His figure floated up and flew towards the location that the disciple said. As for where these Cool Breeze Valley disciples would go, it wasn't Xiaohua's concern. He kept flying north for more than 40 miles, and he saw a mountain peak standing in the middle of the river like a mainstay. All the flowing ice that rushed to this place was blocked by this mountain peak and shattered. Then, the river water was divided into 2 halves. One half was slightly cool and slightly oval, while the other half was slightly turbid and slightly wavy. Xiaohua flew to the turbid area, and with a sweep of his divine sense, his hands formed a water-repelling seal, and his figure rushed straight into the river water. He plunged straight into the river water for more than 10 feet, and he saw that there were more than 10 holes in the mountain peak. Xiaohua picked one up and rushed into it. Naturally, there was river water in the cave, but the cave was very long. After flying along the cave for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, his eyes suddenly opened up. The river water had disappeared, and what appeared in front of Xiaohua was an endless karst cave. Hiss! Xiaohua stood in the air, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The karst cave was filled with the smell of blood, and the ground was covered with corpses. The stone walls, the ground, and everywhere else were covered in dirty blood. However, when Xiaohua released his divine sense and Buddhist sense, he found that they were limited by the special stone walls of this place, and couldn't go very far. AI. This flowing ice valley is so difficult to enter, and it's really a case of one man holding back 10,000 men. The cultivators of my Dao sect were able to enter, and they suffered heavy casualties. Xiaohua clapped his hands, took out the Yang Leaf fan, and flew in after finding a direction. It seemed that the battle in Flowing Ice Valley had come to an end. Although there were some swordsmen and cultivators who survived, Xiaohua didn't care. He passed through one karst cave after another, and flew towards the innermost part of the spirit stone vein. After the time it took to eat a meal, and who knew how many corpses he had seen, Xiaohua was somewhat impatient. At this moment, the token in his hand suddenly moved. Xiaohua was overjoyed. He immersed his divine sense in to take a look, and his figure immediately turned left and flew towards a dark karst cave. Sure enough, just as he turned a few corners, he heard a rumbling sound of thunder in front of him, and the faint sound of collision. Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he used the Devil Realm's concealment technique, and quietly rushed in. He saw that this was an incomparably huge underground karst cave, and this karst cave was connected to one another. It was probably tens of li in size, and there were many stalactites hanging from the stone walls above his head, and they were actually tens of zhang high. Looking at his feet, there were also some large and small stalactites, and they flickered with a strange brilliance. This space was so big, so wide, and he didn't know how deep he was in Flowing Ice Valley. Damn it, if it weren't for those few Cool Breeze Valley disciples, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to find this place in my lifetime. Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense, and he had already seen that there were tens of thousands of cultivators fighting in this underground karst cave, and it wasn't too difficult to find Li Zongbao. Chapter 25:14. Sure enough, Xiaohua flew to the highest point of the cliff. Just as he flew a few miles, he heard a familiar voice shouting, "Don't go, eat my whip!" Damn it! Xiaohua swept with his Buddhist awareness and immediately recognized Li Zongbao, who was holding the piercing immortal whip in his hand. That dazzling yellow piercing immortal whip streaked across the sky like a golden dragon and rushed into the flying sword of a drawing swordsman. However, Xiaohua saw that the shadow of the piercing immortal whip was abnormally clear and there was only one shadow. He knew that Li Zongbao's magic power should be almost exhausted. Just as he expected, Li Zongbao's opponent was a tall and fat middle-aged swordsman. Just his figure alone was 2 times bigger than Li Zongbao. Seeing the piercing immortal whip coming, the fat swordsman's face showed disdain. The sword in his hand changed slightly. The shadow of the sword changed instantly and turned into a huge solid ice, blocking the piercing immortal whip. Poof! The piercing immortal whip rushed into the solid ice, shattering the sword light in the middle. Moreover, as Li Zongbao formed another seal, the piercing immortal whip violently swung, as if it wanted to crush the shadow of the sword. Who would have thought that the solid ice would also let out a sword cry at the same time? All the sword lights were like flowing ice in Flowing Ice Valley, wrapping around the piercing immortal whip in an instant. The sword lights pierced into the shadow of the whip and the yellow brilliance drilled in. Explode! Li Zongbao's face flashed with a trace of redness. The seal in his hand changed again. The brilliance of the piercing immortal whip brightened, and all the brilliance seemed to leave the body. Following Li Zongbao's shout, it suddenly exploded. With a loud rumbling sound, all the sword lights turned into fireflies and scattered in all directions. The middle-aged swordsman's body shook violently. Obviously, his flying sword was damaged and he was seriously injured. However, he still gritted his teeth and formed another seal with all his might, wanting to take back his flying sword. But at this moment, a huge halo suddenly fell from the sky and wrapped around the swordsman's waist. The swordsman was shocked. He hurriedly jumped up and lowered his head. The small life sword in his mouth pierced towards the halo. However, he was still too slow. He saw a sawtooth shape suddenly appear on the circle of light. It spun rapidly and shrank rapidly. Before the swordsman's intrinsic sword could fly out, it immediately sliced the swordsman in half. The sword light on the swordsman's body flickered rapidly before he lost his life. Immediately after, a black shadow rushed over from a corner not far away and grabbed the swordsman's storage pouch. At the same time, the broken flying sword was also put into the storage pouch. Who else could it be but Xiao Mao? Xiao Mao was the one who had deftly turned the light ring into a universe ring. Xiao Mao stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers at Li Zongbao. Once again, he slipped into the darkness like a cat. At the same time, he activated the invisibility talisman and his entire body disappeared. Li Zongbao's expression did not change. He turned a deaf ear to Xiao Mao's signal. With a wave of his hand, the immortal piercing whip that had lost its luster fell into his hand. He reached into his storage pouch and took out a jade bottle. Without even looking, he poured out a few elixirs and swallowed them. After waiting for a while, Li Zongbao's face gradually returned to normal. He raised his eyes and looked around. There were no swordsmen within 100 feet of him. The closest ones were 2 disciples of the middle foundation establishment stage and 2 disciples of the 3rd grade. Although it was a bit difficult, it was not dangerous. Sigh. Li Zongbao sighed inexplicably. Although he could still use his divine thoughts, he could not help but turn his head and look at the entrance of the karst cave. However, there was still a lot of fighting at the entrance of the karst cave. Hundreds of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators blocked Li Zongbao's line of sight, making it impossible for him to see if that person was at the entrance of the karst cave. This kind of helplessness made him feel even more helpless. Li Zongbao originally thought that as the #1 person below the golden core stage, he would be like a fish in water in this battle of Dao cultivators. However, the cruelty of reality taught him a lesson. An individual's cultivation would always be insignificant on this battlefield where thousands or even tens of thousands of people were involved in a battle. Unless this person's cultivator could control this battle. Could Li Zongbao's cultivation do it? Obviously, he could not. Against a 6th grade swordsman, Li Zongbao could easily kill him with disdain. Li Zongbao would be able to kill 10 swordsmen who were at the 6th grade of unsheathed swords. But against 100? Not to mention 100, even against 26th grade swordsmen, Li Zongbao knew that he would not be able to win easily. Even if he could perish together with them, it would be good enough. Thinking back to the day when he mocked those cultivators who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, Li Zongbao could not help but laugh bitterly. Those cultivators did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, but they also knew the importance of teamwork. Hundreds of them attacked together, but he was alone. With the permission of the meeting hall, he was abnormally arrogant and wanted to kill Qin Jian. How could he kill Qin Jian? That was an illusory swordsman. Furthermore, all the cultivators did not know whether Qin Jian was a 2nd grade or 3rd grade illusory swordsman. Furthermore, none of the cultivators who saw Qin Jian returned alive. It seemed that the one who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth should be him. If it was before coming to Flowing Ice Valley, Li Zongbao was still a little disdainful of swordsmen. He felt that they were just so, and he had killed many of them. However, after fighting with the swordsmen of Flowing Ice Valley for half a day, Li Zongbao realized that the swordsmen of Flowing Ice Valley were very different from the ones he had met before. Not only were they very experienced in fighting, but their methods were also very ruthless. They often had some unexpected methods that made Li Zongbao tremble in fear. Thinking back to the day when he came to help the ambushed disciples of the Utopia faction, and then thinking back to the dozens of sword cultivators he had killed in the past half a day, Li Zongbao's heart was a little red. Among the dozens of sword cultivators, only 4 or 5 of them were killed by Li Zongbao alone. In the end, he was besieged by 3 6th grade swordsmen. If it wasn't for Xiao Mao's help, risking his life to surprise and kill 1 swordsman, how could he have taken advantage of the chaos to kill 2 swordsmen? Xiao Mao also suffered some internal injuries because of this. He had a private discussion with him and asked him to challenge the swordsmen while Xiao Mao secretly killed them. Normally, Li Zongbao would have rejected without hesitation. He had no intention of cooperating with Xiao Mao, who was only in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. But today, he could only nod his head. So much so that he understood in his heart that Xiao Mao was actually taking care of him. However, he did not see anyone coming from the karst cave. Li Zongbao turned his head sadly. At this moment, a voice floated down from above his head. Ha! Senior brother Li, you dropped something? Bullshit. You're the one who dropped something. Li Zongbao's eyes burned, and he scolded in an extremely rare manner. Xiao Hua's figure in front of him fell down along with his voice. Hee hee. Xiao Hua smiled faintly and gestured towards the place where Xiao Mao was hiding. Come here, big brother. Xiao Mao cried out in pleasant surprise. He appeared from the side of a stalactite and was about to rush over. Careful, Li Zongbao said anxiously. At this moment, not far from Xiao Mao, a 3rd grade swordsman had just killed a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator and was looking for an opponent. Seeing Xiao Mao appear, he pointed his finger without hesitation. A stream of light pierced towards Xiao Mao's back at lightning speed. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered. That swordsman cried out, covered his head with both hands, and fell to the ground. Xiao Mao naturally dodged the flying sword very easily and killed that swordsman. Then, he naturally picked up the storage bag and flew over. Senior brother Li. What happened to you? Xiaohua suddenly turned his head and glanced at Li Zongbao, whose expression was not right. No, nothing. Li Zongbao's face gradually turned cold. Just now, there was some backlash from my mental cultivation method. And Xiaohua's heart trembled, and he did not dare to ask more. Big brother, why did you only come now? Xiao Mao did not suffer any backlash from his mental cultivation method and asked happily. This is already fast enough. Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Do you know how far 7 Extremes Ridge is from here? I don't know. Xiao Mao answered honestly. How's 7 Extremes Ridge? Li Zongbao's tone was already indifferent. How's your Imperial Thunder Sect's situation? I haven't arrived yet, but I heard that a Golden Core Master went over and killed a 3rd-grade illusory sword cultivator from 7 Extremes Ridge. The sword cultivators of 7 Extremes Ridge have all retreated from 7 Extremes Ridge. Xiaohua said with a smile. And so it's like that. Li Zongbao nodded slightly. Where are the Golden Core Masters? Xiaohua looked and asked. Xiao Mao saw that Li Zongbao's expression was not right and hurriedly replied, Martial Uncle Chu Hui from Utmost Happiness Faction, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu from Chongbai Sect, and Senior Su Bo from Cool Breeze Valley. They entered to kill the illusory sword cultivator. And so, there are no golden core cultivators in this karst cave? Xiaohua said with a smile. Xiao Mao nodded habitually and was very puzzled. Yes, good. Xiaohua pointed at the entrance of the karst cave and said, Brother Li, Xiao Mao, take out your weapons and fly side by side in front of I. If you see any swordsmen, kill them all. How about it? This. Okay. Xiao Mao was quite puzzled, but he still nodded. Okay. Li Zongbao said concisely. Let's go. Xiaohua waved the sunleaf fan in his hand lightly, and a hot aura reverberated around the two of them. Li Zongbao turned around and flew towards the entrance of the karst cave. Although Xiao Mao was puzzled, he did not dare to be negligent. He flew to Li Zongbao's side, stretched out his hand, and took out his magic whip. After flying for a few feet, he encountered a 4th-grade swordsman who was fighting with a Foundation Establishment cultivator. The swordsman was like the swordsman just now. He suddenly covered his head with both hands, as if his head was hit by a flying sword. That Foundation Establishment cultivator, I was still stunned at the side. Li Zongbao mercilessly lashed out with his whip, and immediately broke the swordsman's forehead. Immediately after, Li Zongbao did not even look and flew forward. Senior Brother Li, the storage bag. Xiaohua cried out from behind. That Foundation Establishment cultivator was a disciple of Utmost Happiness Faction. Seeing that Senior Brother Li Zongbao was so powerful and helped him out of danger, he hurriedly shouted, Thank you, Senior Brother Zongbao. Chapter 25:16. After expressing his gratitude, the apprentice of the Utopia faction flew to the swordsman and took his storage bag. Then, he took out his own elixir and swallowed it. Then, he stood in the air and adjusted his breath slightly. Seeing that the disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction took the storage bag, Xiaohua curled his lips and raised his eyebrows somewhat helplessly. He muttered, although a fly is small, it's still meat. The second opponent of Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and Xiao Mao's group of 3 was a 6th-grade swordsman who had just killed another cultivator. Seeing the 3 of them flying over, he laughed nastily and was about to activate his flying sword. At the same time, the swordsman felt a stinging pain in his head. However, the swordsman suddenly came to his senses and immediately activated his secret technique to resist Xiaohua's soul stab. Go to hell. Xiaohua activated his yang leaf fan and a fire dragon rushed over, wanting to surround the swordsman. The swordsman naturally wouldn't allow himself to be captured without a fight. He activated his sword light and rushed toward the fire dragon. However, Xiaohua's fire dragon was too powerful. The fire passed through the sword light and almost burned the swordsman's body. The swordsman was alarmed and was about to activate his sword energy to extinguish the fire again when he saw a piercing immortal whip and a magic whip attacking from the left and right at the same time. The swordsman only had time to block the piercing immortal whip before the magic whip pierced his throat. When the swordsman fell in mid-air, Xiao Mao very nimbly rushed over and grabbed the storage bag in one hand. Then, with a wave of his hand, The flying sword that fell in midair also flew up. Ha ha ha. As expected of the surname Xiao. Xiao Hua laughed loudly. The actions of Xiao Hua and the other two were immediately seen by several swordsmen. They looked at each other and activated their magic weapons together to fly toward the three of them. The swordsmen were all 5th grade and 6th grade swords. Their flying swords were extremely sharp and the sword light was also of various colors and shapes. Some condensed into thin thorns, some condensed into raindrops. There was even a swordsman whose flying sword turned into the thickness of a pillar and stabbed toward the three of them from several directions. Li Zongbao took a deep breath as usual and was about to wave the piercing immortal whip again. At this time, Xiao Hua laughed in his ear and said, "Senior brother Li, don't be anxious." Immediately, Xiao Hua raised his hand and several inconspicuous yellow talismans flew out. "Big brother, are you sure?" Even though Xiao Mao had great trust in Xiao Hua, when he saw that Xiao Hua actually used a yellow talisman to defend against the enemy, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. However, seeing the numerous yellow talismans gradually transform into a ball of fire, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of several hundred feet actually surged into the ball of fire like a hurricane, and an indescribably terrifying aura was emitted from the ball of fire. Not to mention Xiao Mao, even the swordsmen were greatly shocked. Fortunately, one of the swordsmen came to his senses quickly and shouted, "Let's go!" As he spoke, he was about to activate the flying sword that had already pierced into the fireball in preparation to escape. Rumble! No one had ever seen such a huge fireball talisman before. Like a blazing sun, it exploded beside several swordsmen. An incomparably hot flame rushed towards Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, and the two of them were pushed back more than 10 feet by this flame. After the flame subsided, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at the place where they were just now. The previously arrogant flying swords had already been blown away, even if they were scattered in the distant stone wall. At this time, they could see that the quality of each flying sword was different. Some had many cracks, some had no brilliance, and the most miserable one had already been broken in two. Looking at the several valiant and high-spirited swordsmen, they were now blown to a corner of the karst cave. The sword light on their bodies was slightly swaying, and their faces were pale from the lingering fear and the serious injuries of their primordial spirits. "Kill!" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao shouted in unison, and each of them flew towards a swordsman. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took advantage of the eruption of fire spiritual energy from the fire talisman. A fire dragon rushed towards a cultivator, and he himself rushed towards another injured cultivator with a wishful steel staff in his hand. The sound of these fire talismans hidden under the yellow talismans was really loud. The residual sound of the explosion was like thunder rolling in the karst cave. The swordsmen and cultivators in the karst cave couldn't ignore it even if they didn't want to. When they saw Li Zongbao whipping a 5th-grade swordsman until his skin and flesh split open, Xiao Mao throwing the universe ring and smashing a 6th-grade swordsman's brain, and that thin and tall Xiao Hua, who they had never seen before, smashing a 5th-grade swordsman's chest with his club. Furthermore, beside these three swordsmen, there was another swordsman who was screaming from being burned. No matter how hard they tried, the sword light on his body was unable to block the bone-like flames. How could they not be astonished? The cultivators of the Utopia faction, Tai Bai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley were all in high spirits, and many sword cultivators were extremely angry. They all wanted to get away and kill these three extremely cruel cultivators. Of course, they each had their own opponents, and only the swordsmen near Xiao Hua and the others could be mobilized to besiege them. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao didn't have the slightest ripple on their faces when they saw close to 10 swordsmen surrounding them. Xiao Hua's methods were really too many. Not to mention other things, just this fire talisman alone was the first time they'd seen it, and its power was so great, so what if a few more came? Unfortunately, the fire talisman was Xiao Hua's secret item. He took out a few just now just to test its power. There were so many cultivators and swordsmen here, if Xiao Hua used too many, he would definitely be exposed. So Xiao Hua, who was hiding behind Li Zongbao, took out the soul-absorbing bell again. With a loud clang, only 2 of the 10 swordsmen swayed. They tried their best to resist for a moment, but they still fell from midair. The remaining 8 swordsmen's sword light flickered faintly. Although each of them had astonishment on their faces, they all resisted the soul-absorbing bell's soul-absorbing technique. Damn it, this thing is getting more and more useless. Xiao Hua was very helpless. He put the soul-absorbing bell and the toad into his space. With a touch of his hand, he took out the Yang fan. The 8 swordsmen urged their sword light, but they were somewhat hesitant. After all, their opponent actually had a soul tool. They had experience fighting soul cultivators, and they were afraid that Xianxia would have some soul technique that they couldn't guard against or some inexplicable fire talisman like before. Seeing this, Xianxia was delighted. He hurriedly transmitted a few words to Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao nodded expressionlessly. The immortal piercing whip in his hand shone with a yellow brilliance, and a row of whip shadows smashed towards the 3 swordsmen in front of him. Xiao Mao was somewhat hesitant, but he still obediently urged the universe ring in midair to trap the 2 swordsmen in front of him. Xiaohua's figure swayed, and he actually rushed to the front for the first time. With a wave of his left hand, he still used the universe ring in the sleeve, and the Yang fan in his right hand flashed again. Courting death. The 2 swordsmen in front of Xiaohua were 6th-grade swordsmen. Seeing Xiaohua recklessly challenge them first, they both sneered. One of their sword light flashed, and in a flash, it split into 3 and stabbed toward Xiaohua in a shape. The other swordsman's figure flew up, and both of his legs kicked out. Sword light actually burst out from this swordsman's legs, setting off a whirlwind that rushed toward Xiaohua's fire dragon. Seeing the 3 sword lights fall into Xiaohua's sleeve, the swordsman only laughed nastily. Explode! The 3 sword lights collided with each other, and like fireworks in the sky, countless tiny sword lights streaked across the sky, blooming like dandelions. In the eyes of that swordsman, he seemed to have seen the sword lights pass through Xiaohua's arm, pass through his Taoist robe, and even pass through his body. However, reality was always crueler than fantasy. He saw Xiaohua's Taoist robe cover, and a powerful force was born, enveloping an area of a few feet. An inexplicable imprisoning force came from the space, and in an instant, that swordsman lost contact with his flying sword. That swordsman's face turned ashen. Although he didn't know why this imprisoning force was so strong, he had an intuition in his heart that this imprisoning force seemed to be different from the ordinary ones. Seeing Xiaohua wave his arm and easily catch the flying sword that he was so proud of, as if he was pinching a firefly, the swordsman's figure didn't hesitate. He immediately turned around and fled, wanting to escape as far as he could before his primordial spirit was damaged. Ha! Xiaohua saw that this swordsman was actually so decisive, and was also slightly surprised. This kind of swordsman who could pick up and let go was rarely seen before. Which one of them didn't stubbornly pester and hope for a fluke? In the next moment, Xiaohua didn't crush any sword light, and directly put it into the space. What kind of flying sword could be exchanged for how many spirit stones? Xiaohua probably knew better than anyone else. He wasn't willing to waste it. Of Xiaohua's 2 opponents, one ran away as soon as they met face to face. The other one wanted to run, but he was relatively unlucky and was trapped by Xiaohua's Yang fan. That fire dragon not only entangled his flying sword, but also turned into a wall of fire that surrounded him all around. The hot flames on the fire dragon gradually swallowed the sword light, causing him to constantly urge his sword origin to resist. Seeing Xiaohua turn his head to look at him, that swordsman's heart was hoodwinked, and he actually somewhat trembled. Who would have thought that Xiaohua only glanced at him, and his figure suddenly flew to the side. The Yang fan in his hand disappeared, and a pitch-black stick appeared. He raised his head and struck at one of Xiao Mao's opponents. Ha! Although Xiaohua's wind escape technique was only at the elementary level, it was extremely flexible in this karst cave. In the blink of an eye, he floated to the side of the swordsman. The swordsman was urging his sword light to deal with Xiao Mao, and was quite caught off guard. He couldn't help but be surprised. He opened his mouth, and his small life source sword drew a sword mark, stabbing towards Xiaohua's face. The sharp sound of the wind on the tip of the sword seemed to cut the air. However, when the head of the wishful steel staff strangely fell and hit the small sword with great precision, the strength of the wishful steel staff was like the tongue of a poisonous snake, causing the swordsman's heart to tremble. He couldn't care less about the flying sword that was stabbing towards Xiao Mao, and hurriedly urged his small life source sword. Of course, he was also too late. Although the small sword was as flexible as a fish, and although the small sword was made of extraordinary materials, the wishful steel staff was a fish hook, and the wishful steel staff was a divine thunder falling from the sky. With a paw sound, it hit the small sword. With a crisp "gotcha" sound, the defensive sword light on the small sword was immediately annihilated with the arrival of the wishful steel staff, and the small sword was smashed into pieces. Looking at the swordsman again, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body trembled violently, and his face was pale. His eyes were filled with the incomprehension and fear that all swordsmen who encountered Xianxia had. Then, the shadow of the black stick flashed, and the swordsman didn't know anything. Chapter 25:17. After killing the second swordsman, Xianxia took his storage bag and flying sword and roared, "Give me your life!" The wishful steel staff smashed towards the swordsman who was fighting with Xiao Mao. The swordsman had seen Xiaohua's power and was already frightened. Seeing Xiaohua attack him again, he hurriedly urged his flying sword to block Xiaohua, who knew that Xiaohua's wishful steel staff had only hit a few feet in front of him. Once again, it strangely floated and rushed towards the swordsman who had just escaped from his firewall. Help! The swordsman had just escaped from the firewall and was rejoicing. When he saw Xiaohua rushing towards him like a demon, he couldn't help but shout. Although he shouted and tried his best to urge his flying sword, the flying sword was somewhat vulnerable under Xiaohua's wishful steel staff. Gotcha! The flying sword was broken, followed by a poof. The swordsman's head was also broken. Following the fall of the swordsman's corpse, the swordsman that Xiaohua had just let go also fell from mid-air. The swordsman had urged all the sword energy in his body to meet Xiaohua's staff. Who knew that Xiaohua would leave without any symptoms? The swordsman was stunned and didn't withdraw his flying sword in time, or rather, he didn't have any intention of withdrawing. But his opponent, Xiao Mao, was not stunned. The heaven and earth ring was used in time, taking advantage of Xiaohua's feint to trap the swordsman. At this point, Xiaohua and Xiao Mao had completed their task. As for Li Zongbao, facing two swordsmen of the 5th level, although it consumed his magical power, it was not a problem. Then, Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao were still in front, and Xiaohua was behind. The three of them steadily advanced. Most of the swordsmen behind them were about the 4th level. Under Xiaohua's soul stab, the swordsmen were repeatedly hit. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao easily took their lives. As for the small number of swordsmen who were not afraid of Xiaohua's soul stab, they also became ghosts under Xiaohua's staff. Of course, except for Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, the other disciples of the Utopia faction, Tai Bai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley did not know that it was Xiaohua's soul stab, but when they saw Li Zongbao flying at the front, they all cheered and shouted, "Senior Brother Li is good." Even a few disciples of the Utopia faction who had escaped from the fight also lined up beside Li Zongbao and joined the three of them in killing the sword cultivators. When the three of them arrived at the entrance of the karst cave, there were no surviving swordsmen in this area. There were over 100 cultivators surrounding them. Seeing the entrance of the karst cave, some of the disciples couldn't help but look in the direction of life. Their eyes flashed with hesitation. That's right, they didn't have a chance before, but now that they were faced with a choice, they couldn't help but weigh the pros and cons in their hearts. When Xiaohua saw this, he sneered in his heart. Just now, he had just casually pointed his finger and didn't think too much about it. Who knew that when things came to a head, he actually discovered that his finger really did have a mystery. Li Zongbao also noticed this. He raised the celestial destroying whip in his hand and said coldly, "I'm going to fight my way in. Anyone who still thinks he is a disciple of the Utopia faction and wants to be a disciple of the Utopia faction should follow me into the Utopia faction. After this battle, all of you will be meritorious. I don't need to say anything. Even when you return to the Utopia faction, you can enjoy the rewards with peace of mind. Naturally, anyone who doesn't want to be a disciple of the Utopia faction can leave now. I won't force you." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Zongbao took the lead and rushed towards the swordsmen who were beginning to gather in the distance. Kill! We are all cultivators of the Dao faction. Follow Senior Li Zongbao and kill the enemy. Xiao Mao took the opportunity to shout as well. He held the whip in one hand and the heaven and earth ring in the other as he stood side by side with Li Zongbao. Naturally, Xiaohua didn't say anything and quietly followed behind them. Kill! I'm familiar with Senior Li Zongbao. Even if I die here today, I can explain to Master. If I run away, I can't bear to part with my junior sisters of the Utopia faction. A short, Wretched old man with triangular eyes and a goatee chuckled. He pounced forward and held up a magic weapon that looked like a pipe in his hand. Not bad, not bad. Another tall, middle-aged male cultivator clapped his hand and a sparkling flying sword appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "My dual cultivation partner is still waiting for my news in the Changbai sect. If she hears that I'm a deserter, what will she think? This Shua would rather die here and break her heart than let her look down on this Shua. Let's go, let's go. I also want to compete with the swordsmen in terms of flying swords." An old male cultivator held a black iron sword in his eagle claw-like hand. He actually called himself Young Master, and chased after them. Immediately, nearly 40 cultivators followed Li Zongbao and the other two and charged into the battlefield again. They charged towards the front where blood and death were intertwined. The other 60 disciples were mostly disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and the Changbai sect. They hesitated for a moment and looked at each other. Another 40 disciples waved their hands and charged in bravely. They caught up with Li Zongbao and the others and looked at the last 20 disciples. Their eyes were full of unwillingness. At this moment, a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator with a face as white as jade whispered, "Do you all remember the purpose of coming to the Flowing Ice Valley this time?" When the other disciples heard this, their faces were filled with ecstasy. A female cultivator with a large scar on her forehead said hurriedly, "Yes, yes, we came to the Flowing Ice Valley to spy on the strength of the swordsmen. We didn't have to attack the Flowing Ice Valley. Li Zongbao is not part of our team this time," the white-faced cultivator said coldly. "His cultivation is high and he can freely enter and exit the Flowing Ice Valley, but we can't. Moreover, he is fond of grandiose achievements. In order to become the strongest person below the Golden Core stage, he likes to kill sword cultivators. His purpose is different from ours today." Yes, yes, Li Zongbao doesn't know the purpose of this place at all. He only joined later. The female cultivator said hurriedly, "We will return to the Sky Patrol City and report the strength of the sword cultivators in the Flowing Ice Valley to the conference hall. Then, we will have completed this mission. In addition, we can find other helpers on the way. Let's go." Before the female cultivator finished speaking, another male cultivator suddenly flew out of the karst cave and said coldly, "I'm here to contribute to my Dao sect, not to sacrifice my life for Li Zongbao's reputation. I only listen to the orders of the conference hall. Li Zongbao is not our leader. I have no reason to listen to him." Then, the 20 people did not say anything else and flew away with a clear conscience. Of course, whether they could fly out of the Flowing Ice Valley, whether they could fly back to the Sky Patrol City, and whether they could complete their mission as they said, no one would know. Xiao Hua did not pay attention to this place at all. Everyone had their own fate and each person had their own choice. Just like the Cool Breeze Valley cultivator he met earlier, Xiao Hua did not care at all. His attention was now on the swordsmen in front of him. There were many swordsmen in the karst cave. There were definitely more than 10,000 of them. Xiao Hua and the other two were like a drop in the ocean. Even with the dozens of people who came with them, they were far from being a threat to them. What Xiao Hua wanted to do was to kill the enemies as soon as possible and instill fear in the hearts of these swordsmen. Just like his fierce reputation of the terrifying phoenix, the swordsman would retreat without a fight. In just a few breaths, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao encountered swordsmen in front of them. Just like before, Xiao Hua secretly attacked. After the sneak attack was successful, Li Zongbao would attack. If they encountered a difficult opponent, Li Zongbao would activate his magic power, or Xiao Hua would attack forcefully. Xiao Mao's magic power was slightly weaker, so he only dealt with opponents that he was confident in. The outstanding performance of these three people naturally made the dozens of people who followed them excited. They also lined up behind the three of them, forming a sharp knife shape, and stabbed towards the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators who were entangled. Xiao Hua hid behind Li Zongbao. Seeing that the morale of the crowd was high, he was also happy. When he saw other cultivators fighting against the swordsmen, he also used the soul stab from time to time. Most of the time it was successful. However, these cultivators did not know that it was Xiao Hua's credit. They all cast grateful gazes towards Li Zongbao. Gradually, more and more cultivators and swordsmen noticed the situation on this side. Almost all the places where Xiao Hua and the others passed by, the swordsmen were killed by them together, and the cultivators also merged into their torrent. Just like the river water of Flowing Ice Valley, Xiaohua and the others were the drop of snow water of Shuiyu Mountain. Gradually, as they flowed through the ice field, more and more snow water mixed in, and this snow water became more and more, and also became a trickling stream. And the drop of snow water in front of this stream was incomparably hot, incomparably red, and all the coldness and ice layers could not block its sharpness. All the ice turned into flowing water under its magic power. Therefore, this stream became even bigger, and many little drops made an ocean, and it actually became a torrent. Of course, Xiaohua was enduring silently. Of course, Xiao Mao's cultivation was relatively shallow. Of course, Li Zongbao's glory was unparalleled for a time. However, at this time, no one would treat Li Zongbao as a person, and no one would ignore Xiaohua and Xiao Mao. This was because the three of them were a small team, and Xiaohua and Xiao Mao had been fighting together from beginning to end. At this time, Li Zongbao was not alone, but three people. Perhaps in the past, Li Zongbao claimed to be the #1 gold core cultivator, but from today onwards, after this battle in Flowing Ice Valley, the title of the special team of the conference hall would replace Li Zongbao's previous reputation. Kill, Li Zongbao roared, and the immortal piercing whip lashed out again. Although it didn't bring about too many whip shadows, he didn't seem to be worried about the might of the immortal piercing whip. With a loud bang, the whip shadow collided with the huge sword light, and this sword light was like a mountain. Boom! Immediately after, another fiery light flashed by, and Xiaohua's Yang Leaf fan rushed forward. The fiery light covered the sword light that was missing a piece from the immortal piercing whip, and crazily swallowed it. Wu Xiaohua's fiery light had just stopped for a moment, and Xiao Mao's universe ring flew over again, and fell down smoothly. The sawtooth inside the ring made a strange sound, and the huge sword light was ground into pieces. Chapter 25:18. Behind the three of them, a Tai Bai sect disciple raised his flying sword. With a flash of sword light, the yellow flying sword was smashed into pieces. The flying sword of a 6th-stage swordsman was destroyed by 3 people. Naturally, because of the appearance of Xiaohua, Xiao Mao, and Li Zongbao, the cultivators of the Taoist sect were once again united. Of course, the sword cultivator also joined forces. The destruction of the flying sword of the 6th-stage swordsman was only a small part of the confrontation between the swordsmen and the cultivators. However, this small part also represented the current situation of the battle. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had gradually gained the upper hand. Compared to the cultivators, these swordsmen seemed to know more about the techniques of war. Seeing that the situation had changed, the dozens of disciples of the Void Heaven Sword School had already tacitly occupied the advantageous terrain. Each of them urged their fellow swordsmen to hold their flying swords in their hands. When the cultivators led by Li Zongbao arrived in front of them, everyone shouted in unison. Dozens of flying swords flew out and condensed into a huge flying sword. Disciples! Li Zongbao also shouted, urging the disciples to meet the battle. The swordsmen had been preparing for a long time. At this time, they attacked to catch the cultivators off guard. The disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction were obviously not as well trained as the swordsmen, so how could they make it in time? Senior brother Li, junior brother Xiao, help me! Seeing this, Xiaohua immediately shouted and flew out, waving the wishful steel staff to meet the huge flying sword. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had finally gained the upper hand. If they couldn't block this sword, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Help you? When Li Zongbao heard this and saw Xiaohua take the initiative to fly out, he was bewildered. He really didn't know how to help Xiaohua. However, he had always known Xiaohua's ability and boldly guessed that the culprit who killed Tu Hong was Xiaohua. He felt that Xiaohua would be able to block the joint attack of dozens of swordsmen. Xiaohua's shout was just a cover. Okay, Li Zongbao hurriedly flew up and hurriedly gave Xiao Mao a look. Xiao Mao also hurriedly flew up. The two of them had the same idea and the same action. One of them urged the magic weapon to attack the flying sword, while the other patted Xiaohua's direction. From the looks of it, they were using some kind of joint attack secret technique that no one knew about. Sure enough, as the two of them raised their arms, Xiaohua's entire body was enveloped in flames that soared into the sky. The flames were extremely dazzling. Not only did it block everyone's gazes, it also greatly disturbed their divine senses. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. Xiao Hua's wishful staff hit the huge flying sword. Even though Xiao Hua let out a strange cry of ouch, and his entire figure flew back like a flying sword, charging straight into the distance, the combined attack of several tens of shining swordsmen had actually been mostly dissipated by him. The sound was the sound of the collision between the wishful steel staff and the flying sword. The sound was almost earth-shattering, shaking the entire cave. Furthermore, the huge shockwave before the collision had stirred up the heaven and earth spiritual chi in an incomparably chaotic manner. It spread through the entire space in all directions. Not only were countless stones falling from the special stone walls of the karst cave, but the deafening sound also made all the cultivators and swordsmen dizzy. These three people are too powerful. Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao's magic weapons collided with the huge flying sword. Naturally, they were not its opponent, and their figures flew back along with Xiao Hua. Everyone looked at the three people who were knocked back, and then looked at the sword shadow that had almost dissipated. They all gasped. Especially the swordsmen. They knew the power of their joint attack of the flying sword. Without the strength of a second-grade illusory sword, it was impossible to do it. Kill! While the cultivators were shocked, the disciples of the Utopia faction were also ready. Dozens of disciples who were also closest to Li Zongbao urged their magic weapons at the same time, and together, they smashed into the flying sword. Buzz buzz buzz. There was a burst of golden sounds, and the remaining flying swords were forced to fly back by the joint attack of the disciples of the Utopia faction. Many of the flying swords were even broken. Attack! Seeing that they had obtained victory, the other disciples also roared, and one after another, they took out their magic weapons and magic weapons. With a rainbow-like momentum, they rushed toward the swordsmen who were somewhat flustered with a tide-like attack. Just as mentioned before, the situation on the battlefield was too delicate. Xiao Hua's attack seemed to have scattered the swordsmen's last stubborn defense, their last persistence, and their last pride. At the same time, it also sounded the horn of victory for the cultivators. If these experienced swordsmen organized a few more times, they might be able to turn the situation around. However, when they saw the cultivators launch another attack, they chose to be defeated after panicking. Of course, it was also because these swordsmen had battle experience that they knew that the situation was hopeless, and so they fled. A defeated army was like a landslide. This was exactly the case. Not to mention third-grade swordsmen, even sixth-grade swordsmen would hastily step on their flying swords and flee. Fortunately, there were a lot of stalactites in this karst cave space, and there were even more karst caves of various sizes. The flying speed of the swordsmen was also extremely fast. Although they were chased by the cultivators from behind, the swordsmen still maintained a straight posture. Damn it, why isn't anyone helping me? Where did all those junior sisters go? Xiao Hua shook off the water droplets on his body and stood up from under a stalactite. His gaze looked at the utmost happiness faction and Tai by faction disciples who were chasing further and further away, and he shouted angrily. He was truly sent flying by the swordsman's flying swords, and his back crashed into who knows how many stalactites. Heh, how about little brother help you? Xiao Mao's voice sounded not far away. He and Li Zongbao merely borrowed the momentum to fly backwards. How could they compare to Xiao Hua? Even if they crashed into the stalactites, that was also an act. Tisk, forget it. Do you have jade hands again? Xiao Hua clapped his hands, took out a few jade bottles, and threw them to Xiao Mao. You'd better hurry up and take these pills. The magic power in your body has long dried up, right? Heh, little brother can't compare to big brother. Xiao Mao took a few pills without hesitation and handed the jade bottle to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao still had a cold face. He took the bottle, sniffed it with his nose, frowned slightly, and then looked at it a few times, poured out a pill and swallowed it into his stomach. Then his eyebrows slightly relaxed, and he looked at Xiao Hua even more thoughtfully. After taking the pill, Xiao Mao whispered, Big brother, the senior brothers of the utmost happiness faction have already flown far away. Should we hurry over? Damn it, if you want to go, you go. Xiao Hua waved his hand. How much magic power do you have to consume? Anyway, I don't dare to go. Xiao Mao seemed to wake up from a dream and said with a smile. Yes, little brother understands. You have to do things in moderation. Too much is as bad as not enough. If we can show off our invincible power again, Big brother. I'm afraid it'll be hard to explain. What's hard for me to explain? Xianxia curled his lips. Heh, big brother, after this battle, your name will be known throughout the entire Sky Patrol City. Xiao Mao gave a thumbs up. That shocking strike just now. It's really powerful, that's dozens of bright swordsmen. Alas! Hearing this, Xiaohua's face immediately became long, and he looked at Li Zongbao, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Senior brother Li, this is all thanks to you. Your secret joint attack is really powerful. I'm just a brute force, and I only borrowed the magic power of senior brother Xiao Mao and junior brother Xiao Mao. This strike doesn't deserve any credit from me. It's all thanks to senior brother Li. Yes, Li Zongbao's expression didn't change, and he nodded slightly. What credit do you have? It's all mine. It's me who brought you to Flowing Ice Valley, and it's me who taught you the secret joint attack. Furthermore, the attack just now was also the result of my magic power transforming into physical strength. Great! Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, in this world, only senior brother Li knows my heart. However, even if I admit it like this, in the eyes of some people, there are still some problems. Li Zongbao reminded Xiaohua with a rare flash of worry in his eyes. Alas, I know. Xiaohua looked up at the crowd that had already disappeared, and sighed. But if I don't do it, senior brother Li will be the first to disagree. I won't disagree. Li Zongbao shook his head. I will only fight to the death. Not only will I disagree, even big brother won't agree. Xiao Mao said with a grin. He was in an extremely good mood. His cultivation was the weakest among the three of them, and it had always been Xiaohua who took care of him. Today, he and Li Zongbao had cooperated extremely well. Not to mention killing countless sword cultivators, even that last wave of their hands at the same time seemed to be telepathic. They had really helped Xiaohua a great deal. Moreover, the three of them had limitless glory today, and 30% of it was his, Xiao Mao's, share. In the entire Xuanyan school, there probably weren't many who could catch up to him, right? Let's go. We'll go see Martial Uncle Xiehui and the others. Li Zongbao said with a wave of his hand. Senior brother Li, are you sure? Xiaohua hurriedly advised. That's a battle between golden core cultivators. Can you afford to get involved? I can't afford to get involved, but someone else can. Li Zongbao said coldly. Martial Uncle Xiehui is my martial uncle, and also the main instigator of the Feather Immortal gathering. He's been good to me, so I can't not help him. Damn it, I knew it. That day you came to the Utopia faction in a hurry, so that's why. Xiaohua said helplessly as he flew up. At that time, I didn't know you were Martial Uncle Xiehui, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to go to the Seven Extremes Mountains. Li Zongbao retorted. Forget it. What else could Xiaohua say? Li Zongbao had already said so much, and he was almost dragging Xiaohua along. But, senior brother Li. Xiaohua still exhorted. My magic power is now exhausted, and I still have to rely on senior brother's secret technique, and I still have to rely on senior brother and junior brother Zhao's help. I know. Li Zongbao was a little impatient. Every time I see your magic power exhausted, and every time I see you recover the fastest. Don't worry, the cultivators of the Utopia faction are all responsible, and we won't forget our righteousness at the sight of profit. Hearing Li Zongbao say responsible, Xiaohua's expression became a little gloomy. Obviously, he was mocking the irresponsible Qian Mo of the Imperial Thunder Sect, who only treated the Imperial Thunder Sect as a big sect, who only showed the style of a big sect, but didn't have the strength of a big sect. Chapter 25:19. Xiao Mao also looked at Xiaohua sympathetically. He wasn't a famous disciple in the Xuanyan school, but in the meeting hall, he was protected by Gao Wei. But Xiaohua... Cough cough. Li Zongbao suddenly said in a low voice, actually, the Utopia faction values the disciples of other sects very much. His voice was very soft and even a little hesitant. Xiaohua heard it and felt warm in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but laugh. Needless to say, Li Zongbao's master, De Sun, wanted Li Zongbao to say these words to Xiao Hua. Li Zongbao had obviously guessed that he was the culprit behind Tu Hong's death, but he still said these words. However, this sentence was quite rebellious. Li Zongbao couldn't say it clearly, so Xiao Hua just pretended that he didn't hear it. There were many caves in the karst cave space, and the directions were also very complicated. Xiao Hua's divine thought and Buddhist sense couldn't go very far. In such a place, he was already confused. But Li Zongbao was much stronger than Xiao Hua. With just a glance and a slight sniff, he quickly found a path that was different from many cultivators chasing after the swordsman. Seeing that there were no bloodstains or corpses on the path, Xiao Hua was a little surprised. He couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Senior Brother Li, how did you know? Tu Hui's whereabouts? Is it some kind of secret art of the Utopia faction?" Xiao Hua was sincerely asking for advice. After all, he was too weak in this aspect. If Li Zongbao really had some kind of secret art, maybe he would be thick-skinned and ask for advice. Who knew that Li Zongbao's words would make him stunned? Nothing else, just intuition. Well, Xiao Hua shrugged helplessly. He knew that Li Zongbao was telling the truth. It seemed that Cui Hongshan had some strong points in this aspect. Li Zongbao had been flying for more than half an hour. Seeing that there were two forks in the road, Li Zongbao began to hesitate. But at this moment, a deep and obvious rumbling sound came from the cave on the left. Li Zongbao was stunned. Boom! Quick! Li Zongbao heard the sound and was anxious. He held the fairy whip in his hand and rushed to the cave on the left. When Xiao Hua saw this, he did not dare to be negligent. He urged the wind escape technique and instantly overtook Xiao Mao. He followed behind Li Zongbao while holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. After flying for another half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua's keen senses picked up on the minute changes in the heaven and earth spiritual qi. The dense water-type heaven and earth spirit qi became increasingly overwhelming, and the faint restriction within the cave also emitted a faint blue light. Oh! The spirit stones produced by Flowing Ice Valley are water-based? Xiao Hua's brows twitched as he came to a realization. In his mind, the scene of rows and rows of light blue water-type top-grade spirit stones appeared. Damn it! Xiao Hua secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and shook his head with all his might, as if he wanted to shake this tempting scene out of his mind. Nonsense! The spirit stone mine in Flowing Ice Valley had been occupied by sword cultivators for many days, and it was different from the spirit stone mine in Gale Snowfield. How could there be so many spirit stones left here? Xiao Hua wasn't just indulging in wishful thinking. Besides, with Li Zongbao following him, how could he have such an opportunity? What? Li Zongbao suddenly turned his head and looked at Xiao Hua very strangely. Nothing. Xiao Hua shrugged and was about to speak when the dense heaven and earth spirit qi suddenly flowed, as if there was a huge suction force in front of them. Li Zongbao obviously also sensed it. He did his best to urge his flying technique, and his figure sped up a bit. You can't be like this. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out, but unfortunately, it was still blocked by the cave. He muttered, and his figure couldn't help but slow down. When the three of them flew into another karst cave, they unconsciously stopped. They saw that this was a space that was only slightly smaller than the previous karst cave where they were fighting. Inside was a vortex of heaven and earth spirit qi from before. Countless hurricanes blew from all directions of the karst cave and poured into the center. In that space, two white-haired old men stood upright in mid-air. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out, and he felt that the protective brilliance around the two people were flashing with sword light. The sword light was incomparably sharp, as if it could cut through his divine sense. Changbai sect. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed, and he immediately knew that they were the Changbai sect disciples who came to attack Flowing Ice Valley together with Tu Hui from the Utopia sect. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect, Martial Uncle Li. Li Zongbao stopped in midair and transmitted his voice. He is an extremely honest cultivator. TCH, what does being honest have to do with me? Xiao Hua disdained. His enmity with the Changbai sect was huge. Not only did the Changbai sect's nascent soul cultivators want to kill him, but he also wanted to kill the Changbai sect's golden core cultivators. Facing such a sect's golden core cultivators, how could Xiao Hua attack? Hearing Xiao Hua's reaction, Li Zongbao was expressionless. At this moment, the two old men, who were as sharp as swords, moved. In front of one of the old men, a 10-feet-long flying sword vibrated violently. The runes on the flying sword flowed crazily, like countless tadpoles looking for their mother. And with the movement of these runes, thousands of tiny vortexes appeared on the 1-foot-wide sword. Not only did the vortexes emit tiny sword rays, but they also sucked in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the surrounding 10 feet. And as the spiritual chi of heaven and earth poured in, the blue brilliance on the flying sword became even brighter. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect. Xiao Hua did not know much about the flying swords of the Taoist sect and sword cultivators. Seeing the flying sword being used like a magic weapon, he naturally recognized that this old man was Li Feiyu. Li Feiyu was facing a swordsman who looked very similar to him. Although he was wearing a sword outfit, which was very different from Li Feiyu's Changbai sect Taoist robe, who would notice the Taoist robe and sword outfit in the flashing sword light? Disdain appeared on the swordsman's face. He waved his hand and a similar blue brilliance condensed in mid-air. In an instant, it also transformed into a 10-feet-long and 1-foot-wide flying sword. It was actually similar to Li Feiyu's flying sword. However, there were no runes flowing on this flying sword. The entire flying sword was a kind of azure blue. The sword rays were like flickering blue lights. They seemed to be stagnant in the flying sword, but they were flowing extremely quickly. Li Feiyu saw the other party's flying sword taking shape and narrowed his eyes. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Qin Mu Ming, eat my sword!" As he spoke, the big sword followed Li Feiyu's wave and moved slowly in mid-air. Every time the big sword moved, there would be a rumbling sound, as if the big sword was breaking through the air. "Li Feiyu, you and I have fought for so long and I am tired of it. Today, I will let you see the true essence of my sword cultivation. I will also let you know that imitating a cat to draw a tiger will never become a tiger." As he spoke, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword made a strange turn and flashed in mid-air. It gave out a terrifying sword hum and charged straight at Li Feiyu's big sword. If you compare them separately, the flying swords of sword cultivators and the flying swords of Changbai sect are really similar. Even Li Feiyu and Qin Mu Ming have the same temperament. But when these two flying swords meet, they are different. Yes, the essence is different. It was rare to see a Changbai sect disciple using a flying sword to fight a sword cultivator disciple. Xiao Hua's eyes lit up as he watched attentively. Li Feiyu's flying sword gave off a majestic aura. Wherever the sword light passed, it was like the wind blowing through rotten wood, sweeping away all the spirit energy of heaven and earth. On the other hand, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was filled with sword lights. That huge sword was made up of countless sword lights, and each sword light was a tiny flying sword. Although his flying sword didn't have the imposing aura of Li Feiyu's flying sword, not only was the flying sword extremely sharp, the sword light seemed to be able to cut open the void. Even the spirit of each sword light could be seen on the spirit of a sword cultivator. Not to mention that the sword will of Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was like the gurgling flowing water. This blue flying sword was like the river water of flowing ice valley. Even though it was extremely soft, it still had the unyielding will to split the towering valley apart. With a boom, the two flying swords pierced into one place. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and saw clearly that Li Feiyu's flying sword had an imposing aura. The moment it touched Qin Mu Ming's flying sword, it immediately shattered all the sword light on the flying sword. The entire flying sword that was formed by the sword light was struck and collapsed. Li Feiyu's flying sword seemed to have sunk deeply into the sword light. However, after a few breaths, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword showed extreme flexibility. The tenacious power of water was born from the sword light. Not only did it maintain the shape of the flying sword, it also slowly recovered one sword light after another. It supported Li Feiyu's flying sword and then slowly retreated. And when the two flying swords reached a balance, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword suddenly emitted a brilliant brilliance. It was like a spirit snake that had awakened from hibernation and jumped. Like a big mouth, it quickly swallowed Li Feiyu's flying sword. Not only that, the small sword light that was formed by the flying sword ruthlessly pierced into Li Feiyu's flying sword from all angles. In just the blink of an eye, pieces of stains appeared on the flying sword. There was even a faint crack that appeared on the flying sword. Wang wang! The sound of the sword rang. Not only was Li Feiyu's sword light flashing, even Qin Mu Ming's sword light was flashing frequently. Seeing this, Li Feiyu's expression suddenly changed. He narrowed his eyes slightly and his body flashed with rapid magic power fluctuations. The true essence in his golden core was instantly extracted and turned into magic power that surged into the flying sword. With a crisp GA sound, it seemed to be the sound of Li Feiyu's arm or the sound of a certain part of the flying sword. The flying sword suddenly stretched forward and a sword light rushed out from the flying sword. It actually tore a small hole in Qin Mu Ming's sword light and was about to pierce Qin Mu Ming's chest. Pooh! With a soft sound, Qin Mu Ming's left arm moved slightly and another sword light streaked across. It was neither fast nor slow and extremely accurate as it hit the sword light. It immediately shattered the sword light. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.